Hey, you've improved a lot. Li Yan raised an eyebrow. Delighted, he asked, what else can you say? Eh? She understood the first part, but what did the latter part mean? Li Yan's gaze drifted towards her hair. Where's the hairpin? As it turned out, she had taken it off as soon as he had left the kitchen. He hadn't seen it during dinner time either. Li Man knew that he was talking about the hairpin. Originally, she had been worried about what to do, but now that he had come here of his own accord, she could just return it to him. She hastily took out the hairpin that she had tucked inside her clothes and handed it to him. For you. Li Yan narrowed his eyes. You don't like it? Seeing that the smile in his eyes being immediately replaced with icy gloom, Li Man felt as if her little heart was trembling again. Sure enough, appearance was truly the most deceptive thing. She had originally thought this person had the most gentle and warm temperament based on his looks. His smile had been the most assuring one. But now, she realized that while his smiling face looked very good, he could also look quite scary once that smile disappeared from his face. Li Man pretended that she couldn't understand his words. She put down the hairpin on the cooking range and quietly said, "Thank you, I don't like wearing this." After saying that, she hurriedly turned around to resume washing bowls again. However, before she could finish washing even one bowl, he took the cleaning rag out of her hand and clamped his other hand down her shoulder. He forced her to turn around so that she was facing him again. Finally feeling annoyed, Li Man glared at him and asked, "What are you doing?" She turned her face towards the doorway. She hoped that someone would see this scene and put a stop to it, but at the same time, she was also scared of someone seeing this ambiguous scene. She felt unbearably panicky. Li Yan deeply stared at her. His gaze was firm and overbearing. Faced with such a gaze, Li Man gradually lost her ability to resist. She uneasily asked, "What exactly do you want to do?" It was just a hairpin. Why did it look as if he wanted to swallow her alive? Once she gradually stopped trying to resist, Li Yan finally took one hand away to pick up the hairpin and inserted it back into her hair. Li Man secretly rolled her eyes. This person was really stubborn. Fine, it was just a hairpin. She'll keep it. Wear this for now. Seeing that she was stubbornly keeping her head lowered and refusing to look at him, Li Yan slightly curved his lips. He lifted her chin to make her look up. You? Li Man felt slightly angry, but then she saw a long cut on his finger. It looked like an injury from a sharp blade. She suddenly thought of the lovely wood grain on the hairpin. Could he have gotten hurt when he was carving the hairpin? Li Man raised his finger and asked in concern, "Did you injure your finger?" Li Yan couldn't understand all of the words that she had said, but he could hear the concern in her voice. The concern in her gaze was even more apparent. The smile reappeared in his eyes, and he gently stroked her hair with his injured finger. In a confident voice, he promised, "I'll give you a better one in the future." Li Man instinctively tilted her head to avoid his hand. By doing so, she happened to see that Li Mo was standing in the kitchen's doorway. His face looked like an ice sculpture, and his expression seemed livid. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 55. Chapter 55, Discussion. Li Man froze in surprise. How long had he been standing in the doorway? Li Yan turned his head. His expression looked normal as he called out, "Oldest brother." Li Mo muttered an acknowledgement, then he said, "Come over here for a sec, I have something I want to tell you." Oh. Li Yan turned his head back. He looked at Li Man with a slight smile. He raised an eyebrow and whispered into her ear, "I spent a lot of time on this hairpin. Even if you don't like it, you're not allowed to throw it away." After he finished saying these words, he glanced at her with an intense smile before turning around and leaving. Wasn't he being too bold? Li Man was overcome with shock. How could Li Yan have dared to flirt with his future sister-in-law right in front of his oldest brother? What was going on? Li Yan followed his oldest brother into the eastern hut. Li Hua and his other two brothers were sitting on the heated bed and waiting. Seeing these two enter the hut, they scooted closer to the inside of the bed to make room for these two. "Oldest brother, what's the matter?" Li Shu was the first one to ask. Everyone's gaze was focused on Li Mo. Li Mo didn't sit down on the heated bed. Instead, he sat down on a stool that was near the bed. He answered, "I went over to the village head's home recently and heard that Third Li is selling some farmland. His family's farmland isn't that good. Besides, what does that have to do with us?" Li Shu curled his lips. He wasn't interested in this topic at all. In contrast, Li Yan immediately understood his oldest brother's intention and asked, "Oldest brother, could it be that you want to buy his family's farmland?" Li Mo nodded and said, "That's my plan. Even though his family's farmland isn't good, he's selling it for cheap. Also, he's lacking in money recently, so he's willing to sell each field for a discounted price of 2 silver taels." 2 silver taels? This really was very cheap. But, does our family have the money to buy it? This was the part that worried Li Yan. Buying their wife's life contract had used up almost all of their family's savings. Li Mo rubbed his hands and seriously said, "I've already calculated this. There's the money that the village head and Wu family had paid us to compensation for trying to kill our wife, the money from selling fish, the money you earned from working the past few days, and the rest of the family's savings. We have enough money to spend 4 silver taels to buy 2 fields. If we plant the seeds now, we'll still have enough time for 1 harvest this year." "But, isn't Third Li's family's farmland not fertile enough? Will we really be able to harvest anything from there?" Li Shu pessimistically asked. Li Mo replied, "His family's farmland is in a good spot. It's only because he and his brothers aren't willing to work hard, so the farmland has gotten worse out of neglect over the past years. My plan is, we'll buy the farmland and properly tend after it. After a year or two, once the farmland has recovered, the harvests will definitely be good." Li Hua thought it over and said, "I agree." Other than little Five, his brothers were all grown up. It definitely wouldn't be a bad thing for their family to have 2 fields. Li Yan smiled and said, "Oldest brother, if you think this will work out, then let's do it. I'll head over to Uncle Shen's house to collect my money tomorrow morning." Li Mo's expression became less tense. "If you all think this is a workable idea, then I'll head over to the village head's house before noon tomorrow and settle this matter. Oh, and 4th brother, come along with me tomorrow." "All right," Li Hua agreed. Just like, the matter of buying farmland was settled. There was a bit of joy in everyone's hearts. Right now, their family had a wife, pigs, and chickens, and they would soon have farmland of their own. This was how life should be lived. Inside the kitchen, Li Man didn't dare to stay here much longer. She had already seemingly been admonished twice. After tidying up the bowls and chopsticks and heating up some water, she went to her room and washed up. Then, she closed the door to her hut, extinguished the oil lamp, and went to bed. Li Man spent the night tossing and turning. When little Five saw her panda eyes the next morning, he was quite alarmed. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 56. Chapter 56, Quam. Older sister, what's wrong? Little Five worriedly asked while attentively looking at Li Man's bloodshot eyes. Li Man's eyes felt very uncomfortable. She hadn't been able to get a good night's rest. When she finally drifted off when sun was about to rise soon, she ended up having a nightmare. It was truly a torturous night. "It's nothing." She rubbed her eyes and shook her head. She woke up late again, and it was only she and little Five that were left at home. However, just right after thinking this, Li Yan came home. Seeing Li Man, who was underneath the eaves, the smile in his eyes depended. His steps had also increased in speed without him noticing. After last night, Li Man felt lingering anxiety towards him. Seeing him approaching her, she panicked and ran back into her hut. She closed the door behind her and started fretting. She hadn't brushed her teeth, washed her face, or brushed her hair. Little Five came out of the kitchen with a bowl of warm cornmeal congee. Only seeing Li Yan instead of Li Man, he curiously asked, "Second brother, where's older sister?" Li Yan gestured at the western hut with his chin. Smiling, he took the bowl from Little Five. "Let me bring it to her." Then, he gently knocked on her door. Li Man had tidied up her clothes and was now brushing her hair. Hearing someone knocking on her door, she furrowed her brow. She knew it had to be Li Yan because Little Five never knocked on her door. Little Five would only crack open her door a little bit and carefully watch her until she finally noticed him. She didn't respond and only blankly looked at the hairpin placed on the wardrobe. Should she wear it? If she wore it, wouldn't that be a sign that she was accepting his feelings? If she didn't wear it, would there be a repeat of last night's encounter? Would he throw a tantrum and do something again? Li Yan forcefully knocked on the door, but it didn't sound impatient. Instead, it gave off a slight sense of courteousness. Still, Li Man couldn't bear it and reproachfully glanced at the door. She grabbed the hairpin and stuffed it into her hair before turning around and opening the door. As soon as she opened the door, she was immediately greeted with Li Yan's gently smiling face and a bowl of cornmeal congee that was still wafting steam. Li Man immediately swallowed her anger back down. It wouldn't be good to show her anger. "Did you not sleep well last night? Your eyes look really swollen." As Li Yan carefully looked at her, a flash of light glimmered in his eyes. He suddenly leaned forward and got very close to her face. He quietly asked, "Was it because of me?" Scared, Li Man retreated several steps. But, she stopped when she saw that he was still standing in the doorway and not taking any steps towards her. She firmly glared at him. Why had he suddenly gotten so close then? Watching her frightened baby rabbit-like demeanor, Li Yan chuckled. He placed the bowl down on the windowsill and said, "You should eat this while it's still hot. I'll take you out to walk around after you finish eating." Little Five hastily grabbed his second brother's hand and fawningly said, "Where are you guys going?" "Second brother, I want to go to." Li Yan kept his gaze on Li Man as he answered, "Oldest brother is currently discussing that matter with the farmland. We're going to go over there to take a look once he's done." Okay. Little Five showed a strong interest. Li Man picked up the bowl from the windowsill. With her back turned to them, she gobbled up the contents of the bowl. "If you're still hungry, eat some pancakes." As soon as she turned around, 2 corn pancakes were given to her. Li Man looked at him doubtfully. Actually, he treated her pretty well, but did he not have any qualms over flirting with his future sister-in-law? "Oh, look at you. You're such a messy eater." Li Yan suddenly curved his lips upwards, and his warm fingers gently wiped something from her face. Li Man blushed. Just as she was going to get angry, he stretched his finger out to show her something. There really was a corn kernel on his finger. Li Man gritted her teeth and still very fiercely glared at him. Even if there was a corn kernel on her face, he could have told her. She could have wiped it off herself. If you find any errors, ads pop-up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 57. Chapter 57, Muden. Seeing her looking annoyed, Li Yan chuckled. He stuffed the corn pancake into her hand, then he patted Little Five's head and said with a smile, "Let's go." "Oh." Little Five glanced at Li Man. "Older sister, let's go look for oldest brother." She followed behind them while munching on the corn pancakes. Right after the 3 of them left their home, a pleasant female voice called out, "Older brother Li Yan." When Li Man turned her head, she saw a girl standing right outside of Li family's home. This girl was quite attractive. She had an oval-shaped face, slender eyebrows, limpid eyes, and small lips. There was even a bashful expression on her face. "Older sister Muten?" Little Five affectionately called out. Muten let out a short, "Oh." Her large limpid eyes were still focused on Li Yan. She quietly called out again, "Older brother Li Yan." Li Yan glanced at her. The smile in his eyes gradually retreated. He said to Li Man and Little Five, "Head over to the entrance of the village and wait for me there. I'll be over there shortly." "Okay." Little Five held Li Man's hand and said, "Older sister, let's leave here first." Li Man understandingly nodded. Before leaving, she looked at Muten again. This girl looked to be around 15 to 16 years old. She looked to be on much better terms with this family compared to the previous girls. From the expression on Muten's face, Li Man could tell that she was definitely interested in Li Yan. Li Yan waited until those two had walked far away before approaching Muten. Looking down at her, he asked, "Is there a problem?" Hearing his cold and indifferent tone, Muten felt her eyes becoming wet. "Older brother Li Yan, you've been working at my home for the past few days. Why didn't you come looking for me during that time? I don't have any business with you. Why would I look for you?" Li Yan indifferently looked at her. Seeing that her long eyelashes were trembling as if she was about to cry soon, he lightly sighed and said, "If there's something you want to say, just say it. If not, I'm leaving. I'm busy." "Older brother Li Yan." Muten raised her head. A dense mist of unshed tears were already in her eyes. "I know it's my family that's at fault, but I wasn't the one that agreed to that marriage. You should know, since we were children, the only person I liked is Dash." "Enough." Li Yan impatiently interrupted her. He stopped looking at her and turned around. Seeing that Li Man and Little Five were almost the village's entrance, he said, "Since it's nothing important, I'm leaving." "Older brother Li Yan." Anxious, Muten grabbed Li Yan's arm. Her voice was choked with emotion as she asked, "Do you really not care? Can you really just stand to the side and watch as I marry someone else?" Li Yan removed her hand. Her almost crying face looked quite pitiful and lovely, and a gloomy feeling gushed up in heart. He frankly said, "Muten, how many times do you want me to repeat myself? I've never liked you. If you don't want to marry that person, just tell your dad and mom." "No, I don't believe you. Older brother Li Yan, I know you're just saying these words out of anger." Muten's eyes were wide with incredulity. Bean-sized tears finally rolled down from the corners of her eyes. Li Yan's brow was furrowed as he glanced at her again. He restrained his temper and told her, "Muten, I'm telling the truth. I've always thought of you as my younger sister Dash." No, Muten suddenly shouted at him. Indignation and unwillingness flickered through her eyes as she cried. Li Yan suddenly realized there was no way to talk sense into her. Otherwise, why hadn't she understood him after so many previous attempts? "I've already said everything that I can say. It's up to you if you want to believe me or not." After coldly saying these words, Li Yan didn't want to continue getting tangled up in this conversation. He simply turned around and left. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 58. Chapter 58, Personal Savings. Seeing that he was leaving, Muten panicked. She really had something important to tell him. "Older brother Li Yan, wait, I have something I want to tell you." Li Yan really didn't have the patience to continue being badgered by her. Actually, he was worried that she was never going to stop pestering him, so he took large steps and intentionally tried to leave Muten behind. However, when Muten thought about how difficult it had been to get her dad and mom to agree to her request, how could she possibly be willing to go back home without clearly talking to Li Yan? She chased after him and shouted, "Older brother Li Yan, listen to me. My dad said that as long as you can take out 20 silver taels, then he'll be willing for us to dash." Li Yan would have never expected that Newton would be able to persuade her money-loving parents. "Oh, actually, no, 20 silver taels." Huh, for a penniless family like his, 20 silver taels were considered an astronomical amount. Her parents just wanted to use him to get her to give up on her hope. Li Yan stopped and turned around to look at her. In a partially mocking tone, he said, "Newton, do you really believe your parents' words? Besides, even if I did have 20 silver taels, why should I marry you?" Gasping for breath, Newton stopped by his side. She stared at him with reddened eyes that looked very lovely and pitiful. "Older brother Li Yan, don't say that. I know that's not what you really feel. Oh right, I have something for you." As she said this, she looked around. Seeing that there was no one around, she hastily took out a little bag from the inside of her clothes and stuffed into Li Yan's hand. "Older brother Li Yan, I know that 20 silver taels is a lot. This is all of my personal savings. I'll figure out a way for the remaining amount. You have to take good care of this. Once we have 20 silver dash dot." Li Yan deeply looked at her. There was a complicated feeling in his heart. "Newton, don't be like this. I really only think of you as a younger sister. Besides, I already have a wife." "Do you mean the woman from before?" A smile appeared in Newton's eyes. "I know that the two of you haven't consummated the marriage yet. Isn't that right? Besides, there's no reason why we can't be together just because of her. There's still your oldest brother and your other brothers." It was exactly because she wouldn't need to be a shared wife that she had gained the determination to marry Li Yan. "I like her." Li Yan lightly smiled. He stuffed the cloth bag back into her hand. "Take your stuff and go back. Older brother Li Yan dash. I'm going to leave first. My wife is still waiting for me at the village's entrance." Li Yan didn't wait for her to finish. He turned and started walking away. Newton had only taken a few steps forward when a married woman came out, saw her, and asked with a smile, "Io, it's Newton. I haven't seen you leave your home in several days. Where are you off to today?" Newton didn't dare to continue chasing after Li Yan. Flustered, she replied, "I have something dash." The married woman interrupted her. "That's perfect, I have some embroidery that needs to be done. Newton, come over here and take a look." She walked forward and wanted to pull Newton into her home. "Second aunt, my mom is still waiting for me at home." Newton was busy with her own matters. How could she be in the mood to help someone with her work? After freeing herself from her aunt, Newton hastily headed home. The married woman watched Newton's back figure as she left in a rush, then she looked towards Li Yan, who was also walking quickly and had almost reached the village's entrance. Her eyes turned. Plenty of people had said that Newton had feelings for Li family's second son. She had originally not believed them, but having seen it with her own eyes, she could see that those rumors were true. There would be a good show to see in the future. She happily scampered over to her neighbor's home. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 59. Chapter 59, Measuring the Fields. Li Man and Little Five were obediently waiting at the village's entrance. During this time, she finally obtained the information that she wanted from Little Five by employing a variety of methods to communicate with him. As it turned out, that girl's name was Shen Newton, and she was well known in this village. She was the treasured, only daughter of a rich family in this village and the most beautiful girl out of all the villages that were in surrounding area as well. She was considered an excellent young woman that had a meek temperament and was skilled in embroidery. Everyone in the village liked her. Then, Li Yan should also like her. Moreover, from that girl's expression earlier, it was obvious that there was something between her and Li Yan. As Li Man thought about this, she felt both a bit relieved as well as slightly annoyed. She hasn't expected that Li Yan would be such a playboy. He already had such a close female friend that was virtuous and kind-hearted, and yet, he tried to flirt with his future sister-in-law. His conduct was simply too outrageous. When Li Yan sauntered over here, Li Man deliberately glared at him in a meaningful way. She wanted him to feel overcome with shame. Li Yan was even more thick-skinned than she thought. He acted as if nothing had happened. His usual smile was still hanging on his face. Have you become impatient from waiting? Let's go. No way. Just like that. Li Man fiercely swept her gaze over him again. She really couldn't discover any clues from looking at his face. Li Man decided to say a few words to warn him. Using her lousy grasp of the local dialect, she said, "That girl from before, she's pretty good-looking." Li Yan walked while replying, "N. She's called Muden. She lives." Stop. Li Man immediately made a gesture to cut him off. She gave him a meaningful look and said, "Don't explain. I understand everything." After saying this, she pulled little Five to walk faster with her until they were walking in the front. Staring at her back figure, Li Yan shook his head. He could only helplessly chuckle. She had no clue what was going on. After passing through the village's entrance, they headed east for a bit. There were continuous plots of farmland here. Li Mo was currently in one of those plots and busy with work. Li Man and little Five jogged over. Oldest brother, fourth brother. Little Five was the first one to reach Li Mo. Then, he beamed at Li Hua, who was currently writing stuff down. Li Mo ruffled little Five's hair and asked him, "Why are you here?" But, his eyes had instinctively drifted to look at Li Man, who had been following behind little Five. Her cheeks were flushed from the recent jog, and her eyes were especially bright. "Second brother brought us over." Little Five pointed at Li Yan, who was elegantly walking on the footpath between the paddy fields. Oh. As he listened to this answer, Li Mo suddenly noticed the white magnolia flower hairpin that was in Li Man's hair. It was obvious to him that the hairpin was made by second brother. Li Man's face turned even redder as she felt Li Mo's gaze on her. She reflexively looked over at Li Hua for assistance. However, once her eyes met with Li Hua's dark eyes that were tinged with melancholy, she abruptly remembered the kiss from yesterday. Her face immediately became unbearably hot and even the tips of her ears turned red. She was blushing? Was she feeling shy? Li Hua's heart, which had felt depressed for an entire day and night, was brought back to life by this astonishing discovery. Since she felt shy around him, this signified that she was interested in him too. It was as if the sunshine had broken through the dark clouds. Li Hua's attractive face immediately brightened. He warmly introduced the new plots of land to Li Man. "Did you know? These 2 plots of farmland now belong to our family. What do you think we should grow? Buying farmland?" Li Man looked down at the uncultivated land that was full of weeds. The corners of her eyes twitched. "This? Fourth brother, did you record the measurement for the fields?" Li Mo walked over to them and lightly glanced at Li Man in the passing. "Don't judge this field based on its current neglected state. Just wait until we clear out the weeds and properly tend to it, this will become a good piece of land. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible." Chapter 60. Chapter 60, Persuasion. Li Man hadn't expected that Li Mo would take the initiative to directly speak with her. Her face still felt hot as she thought about how Li Mo was probably her future husband. She wasn't sure how to face him and just awkwardly smiled at him as her response. Seeing how forced Li Man's smile looked, Li Mo felt disappointment rolling around in his heart. He knew that he wasn't good at gaining a woman's affection. Li Hua saw his oldest brother's sunken expression and hurriedly said, "Oldest brother, you're right. We'll be able to plant stuff once we remove all the weeds from here in the next 2 days and properly till the soil. We shouldn't be too ambitious and ruin the fields. Let's just start by planting a few crops for now." Li Man blinked. Although she had only understood half of his words, her nervous and awkward feelings had faded a lot after listening to these two brothers' bout of chatting. Li Yan walked over and asked, "Oldest brother, how's it going over here?" Li Mo turned his head. He pointed at something in mid-air and replied, "It's almost done. It's just these 2 plots of farmland. After we finished recording the boundary lines here, we'll just need to go the village head's home and sign the contract." A balding, tan man came over and waved at Li Yan. He also asked Li Mo, Li family's first son, "No problem, right? It's just these 2 plots of farmland. Let me tell you, don't judge it based on how it looks right now. It'll be fine if you just tidy it up a bit. It's because you're the one that's buying them that I'm willing to sell them for so cheap. If it's anyone else, I wouldn't sell them for anything less than 3 silver taels." Li Mo lightly responded. He was aware that this person didn't have a good character. Most people wouldn't be willing to buy farmland from him because they would be worried about future troubles from dealing with him. Thirdly, I tried to take advantage of this opportunity to persuade Li Mo by saying, "There's still 2 more plots of farmland. Do you want to buy them as well? You won't be seeing such low prices again." Li Mo shook his head. "I don't have any extra money, so I'll just buy the 2 plots we agreed to. Thirdly, if there's no other issues, let's go the village head's home and sign the contract." Thirdly, repeatedly said, "Good." He wanted nothing more than to immediately take the money and leave the ravine to have some fun. Li Mo glanced at him and couldn't help furrowing his brow. "Thirdly, you should stop gambling. Now that you have money, you should hurry to find a wife for yourself so that you can live a proper life." I know. Thirdly, impatiently waved his hand. "Who wouldn't want a wife? Besides, it's not like I don't have a wife. It's only that my oldest brother and second brother are too selfish and won't share our wife with me. They even drove me out of our home dash." Li Mo's expression was stern as he lectured, "That's because you're addicted to gambling and won't properly work." He felt very disdainful of people like Third Li, who mooched food and drink from other people instead of properly working to earn a living. Third Li glared at him. Just as his anger flared, he remembered that the person in front of him was Li Mo, who was tall and sturdy enough to be as immovable as a hill. His strength was nothing compared to Li Mo's, so how could he dare to act wild in front of him? He immediately apologetically smiled and said, "Li family's son, you're right. I'll change in the future. I'll definitely change." Li Mo glanced at him. Whether or not Third Li was sincere about changing, it was still good that he knew he needed to improve himself. Standing on the side and watching this scene, Li Yan shook his head and chuckled. If Third Li was capable of repenting, then his 2 older brothers wouldn't have kicked him out of their home. It was only Li Mo that would still try to persuade Third Li to repent. No one else saw any issues with the farmland either, so everyone headed to the village head's home. Once the deed was signed, the sale would be completed. Li Man originally didn't want to go over there, but since everyone was heading over there, she could only follow the crowd. There was a group of women sitting by the village head's home's entrance. They were chatting as they mended the soles of shoes. Seeing the crowd of people coming over here, they immediately stopped their chatter and uniformly turned their attention to those people. MANHWA was especially pleasantly surprised by this unexpected visit. She stood up and approached Li Hua. Her smiling face was like a blossoming spring flower. "Older brother Hua, why are you here?" Li Hua furrowed his brow. His gaze drifted towards Li Man without conscious thought. He was worried that she would misunderstand. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., Please let us know report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 61. Chapter 61, Calculating. Li Mo was walking at the front of the group. He asked, "MANHWA, is your dad home?" Li Mo was the head of his family, and his younger brothers usually always listened to his advice, especially Li Hua, who respected his oldest brother a lot. And so, MANHWA was especially polite to Li Mo too. "Older brother Li, why are you looking for my dad? He just went out. How about you guys wait inside, and I'll go look for him. He probably went over to Uncle Chen's house to play cards." "Sure." Li Mo nodded and led everyone into the village head's home. Since there was no one at home, everyone just waited in the courtyard instead of going in further. Fortunately, it didn't take long for MANHWA to find her father and bring him back. Li Mo handed the contract that Li Hua had already written out to the village head. With the village head as their witness, Li Mo paid the money to Third Lia, and the two of them also each pressed their inked thumbs onto the paper as a way of signing the agreement. After the matter was settled, everyone expressed their thanks and was about to head back to their respective homes. MANHWA grabbed onto Li Hua's sleeve and happily said, "Older brother Hua, it's so nice that your family has bought farmland." Moreover, Li Hua was a candidate who hadn't yet taken the county-level imperial exam. Once autumn had passed, Li Hua would have most likely passed that exam. Even her dad said that Li family must have burnt a lot of incense at their ancestors' graves in order to have such a talented son. Li Hua's future prospects were limitless. Li Hua pulled his sleeve away and gave her a polite, but distant smile. He didn't respond to her words. After that, he followed his oldest brother and walked out of the village head's home through the front doors. MANHWA went back to standing by the gossipy women that were half-blocking her home's entrance. She didn't dare to act clingy by chasing after him. She felt annoyed with herself as she stood in the courtyard and watched as his figure walked further away. MANHWA's mom had returned at some point without her noticing. Seeing her daughter like this, she unhappily commented, "Silly girl, how can you let things continue like this?" "Mom?" MANHWA knew what her mom was referring to. Her little face turned red. In a displeased tone, she said, "Mom, Li Hua is really failing to appreciate being favored. Wasn't it only last year that he got qualified to take the county-level imperial exam for this autumn? Just from that, he thinks he's better than everyone else, but..." MANHWA's mother firmly poked her daughter's head. "You're one to talk. As soon as he comes over, your eyes stick onto him like a barnacle that can't be removed. Even a man would be scared off by you." Mom, MANHWA was so embarrassed by her mother's words that her face was completely flushed red. She looked as if she was about to cry. The village head could hear his wife and daughter from the inside. He couldn't resist coming out and shouting, "You gossiping women! You're bringing shame to our family." MANHWA indignantly turned around and really started to cry. "Dad, weren't you the one that said Li Hua would have bright future prospects and that he'll be just as good as someone born in a family outside of this village? That has nothing to do with you. Dad has his own plans for you. Foolish girl, be good and stay at home. It'll be enough if you don't act shamelessly again," the village head lectured. MANHWA's mother immediately noticed the hidden meaning in her husband's words. "Husband, what are you planning? Their family already has a wife. Our MANHWA can't be someone else's concubine." "Nonsense." The village head rolled his eyes at his wife. "They haven't consummated their marriage with their wife yet. Besides, she's just a woman they bought. How could she be compared to our MANHWA? MANHWA, be good. Let's wait until after the Lunar New Year. If Li family is truly blessed by their ancestors and Li Hua passes the county-level imperial exam, then not only will Dad agree to let you marry him, I won't even ask for any bride price." "Really?" MANHWA's face showed her joyful surprise. Li Hua was clever and studious. Everyone in the village thought he would be able to pass that exam without problems. Now that her dad had said he wouldn't even ask for a bride price, what family wouldn't be overjoyed to receive such good fortune? How could there be anything false about Dad's words? The village head looked at his daughter and thought of how Li Hua would be able to smoothly pass the imperial exam and have an official career that went without a hitch. When that time came, he would be able to ride on Li Hua's coattails by marrying MANHWA to him. It didn't matter what kind of governmental official Li Hua would become in the future. He would definitely benefit just from being the father-in-law of a governmental official. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 62. Chapter 62, West Lake. When Li Mo and everyone else returned home, they saw Li Shu feeding the chicks in the courtyard. Seeing that everyone had returned together, Li Shu immediately shouted, "Where did you all go? No one else was at home. You guys even forgot about feeding the chickens and pigs dash." Oh. Li Man lightly smacked her own head. She was really failing to live up to her responsibilities. She had been the one that wanted to buy the chicks and piglets. And now, she was also the one that forgot to feed them. Let me to do it. She hurriedly ran over to Li Shu's side, took the chicken feed from him, and fed the chicks that were inside the fenced area. Seeing her like this, Li Shu awkwardly scratched his head. "I wasn't scolding you. It was just that I didn't see you when I came back, so he just wasn't used to it, that's all." "I went to look at the fields," Li Man said with a smile. Actually, she wasn't offended by his earlier words. Li Shu skeptically curled his lip as he said, "The fields? What's so interesting in about them? Third Li's fields are just overrun with weeds." Li Man didn't answer him. After she finished feeding the chickens, she asked him, "Have you feed the pigs?" Li Shu immediately raised his eyebrows and replied, "Yup, those two little things have eaten their fill. You can go look for yourself." What was there to see? She knew that Li Shu was very diligent about his work, so she simply said, "Thank you." "There's no need to thank me. It was only right that he would help his wife out by feeding her animals." At this time, Li Mo came out of the kitchen with a bucket to get water from the well. Thinking that Li Shu was pestering Li Man, he said, "Third brother, go take out a fish from the pit." Buying fields could be considered a big event, furthermore their entire family was at home right now, so they should prepare a good meal to celebrate. Feeling quite happy, Li Shu cockily raised his eyebrows at Li Man and said, "Wife, wait here. I'll go get a fish for you." After he finished this, he took out a bamboo pole from the chicken fence and headed over to pit. Li Man was left behind and feeling at a loss. What did he just call her? Wife? Suit? West Lake? T/N, wife, suit, and West Lake are almost homophones in Mandarin. They have the same spelling and only differ by tone marks. No, those guesses were wrong. Suit was a modern-day word. West Lake? Why would he mention that out of the blue? Moreover, she didn't even know if the West Lake existed in this world. Then, that meant he had just called her wife? She had several days' worth of interactions. Although she didn't fully understand the local dialect yet, because this dialect shared many similarities with Mandarin and many words were almost pronounced the same, she was able to guess that Li Shu had probably just called her wife. Wife? As in spouse, star. Asterisk, T/N, Li Man is actually using the old-time word for wife. Then, she lists out a bunch of modern-day Mandarin words that also mean wife, but there isn't really an English equivalent to all those words, so I just used spouse. Li Man was so shocked that her mind seemed to have stuttered to a halt. It couldn't be that she was Li Shu's wife, right? Had she simply misheard, and he had said something else that happened to sound very similar to wife? Right, that was it. She had just misheard him. But when she thought of Li Shu's attitude towards her, she felt a bit apprehensive. Wife, look at this fish. At this time, Li Shu had already gotten the fish and walked back to her side. He waved the fish in front of her to show it off. Feeling as if a chill swept through her, Li Man returned to her senses. Seeing Li Shu's exuberant smile, she couldn't help asking, What did you call me? She was using Mandarin to ask him this question, so Li Shu couldn't understand her. He patted her shoulder and said with a smile, I'll go clean up the fish, then you can cook it. I want to eat that fish with pickled vegetables again. After saying this, he tossed the fish down by the well, then went into the kitchen to get himself a knife and container. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 63. Chapter 63, yeah, right. After Li Shu cleaned up the fish, he handed the fish to Li Man's wife. You were staring at me before, right? He had said these words in a very confident tone, and Li Man was even surer that he was addressing her as his wife. Li Man did her best to use the local dialect to ask him, let me ask you. You called me wife. Wife, what does mean? Could it actually just mean older sister or younger sister? For example, in modern day, depending on the region that you're from, you might call your dad Dai, but in other area, grandfathers would be called Dai. There were also regions where older unmarried women would be simply referred to as Dijia. Wife. Wife just meant wife. Li Shu scratched the back of his head in confusion. He thought for a while before answering, it means a woman that lives with you. Or, fourth brother said it could also be called inside person. If Li Man had just been guessing before, Li Shu's words were like a booming clap of thunder that had been accompanied by a lightning bolt that scorched Li Man from inside and out. She hadn't misunderstood. As it turned out, she was Li Shu's fiancée then? Wife, what's wrong? Seeing Li Man's face turn pale and the blank look in her eyes, Li Shu became very worried. He reached out to touch her forehead. At this time, Li Mo came back with 2 buckets of water and saw the scene. He shouted at Li Shu, Third brother, what are you doing? Oldest brother, come over here and look. What's wrong with wife? Her eyes weren't even moving. Li Shu was truly very alarmed. Li Man hastily grabbed the edge of his clothing and called out, I'm okay. Then, she turned around and dashed into the kitchen. She needed to find a place to be alone, so she could calm herself down and think things through. Li Shu was startled still by her abrupt response. Li Mo coldly glared at his younger brother. He sternly asked, What did you do to her? I didn't do anything. Li Shu widened his eyes. He was totally innocent. Li Mo didn't believe him. If he hadn't done anything, why would wife have looked like that? He hurriedly brought the buckets of water into the kitchen so that he could have an excuse to check on Li Man. Li Man was washing the rice. She knew that Li Mo had come into the kitchen, so she deliberately turned around and kept her head lowered. She didn't want him to see her expression. Li Mo saw her like this and knew that something had to be wrong. He tried to be as noisy as possible when he poured the buckets of water into the large water jar. If today was a normal day, Li Man was turn around to lightly smile at him in greeting. But, she didn't show any sign of acknowledging his presence today. Her small hands were busily washing the rice. It seemed as if she wouldn't stop washing the rice until he left the kitchen. Li Mo finally broke the silence by saying, Third brother doesn't have the best temper. If he did something wrong, just tell me. I'll go discipline him. Don't keep your unhappiness stifled away. Hearing these words, Li Man's heart dropped even further. He was clearly treating her as if he was senior from an older generation. He thought that she and Li Shu just had a quibble, and he come here as a senior to mediate between them. This meant that she had to be Li Shu's fiancée. As the saying goes, an older brother was like a second father, so it was reasonable enough that he would offer to discipline Li Shu. Li Mo thought he had guessed right when he saw her straightening her back. It had to be that third brother had upset her somehow. Her mood had seemed off since last night. Just wait here. I'll call him over here to give you an apology. Ah? Startled, Li Man turned her around, caught up to him by the doorway, and grabbed his arm. Li Mo froze in surprise. He lowered his eyes to look at her. Li Man hastily let him go. Feeling somewhat embarrassed, she looked at the damp spot on his sleeve. Sorry. It's not Li Shu. Li Mo furrowed his brow. He thought she was just trying to excuse Li Shu's behavior. Li Man gloomily bit her bottom lip, then she raised her head and lightly smiled at him. Everything is okay. Don't look for him. I'm going back to cooking. Then, she hastily went back to the cooking range to finish washing the rice and start cooking the rest of the meal. Li Mo felt increasingly doubtful. Everything is okay? Yeah, right. If you find any errors, ads pop-up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 64. Chapter 64, Warning. Li Mo left the kitchen and saw that Li Shu was still standing around in the courtyard and doing nothing. He went forward, dragged him to a corner by his arm, and sternly looked at him. Li Shu was originally going to throw a fit, but seeing his oldest brother's expression, he panicked and asked, "Oldest brother, what are you going to do? Tell me. What exactly did you do to her?" Li Mo's expression was grave as he interrogated in a low tone. What? Li Shu felt baffled. I didn't do anything. Do I have to beat you before you'll be honest? Li Mo's forehead was very wrinkled, and his hand had already clenched into a fist. Li Shu's eyelids twitched in alarm. He retreated a step towards the wall. Oldest brother, what happened? Explain it clearly first. If you didn't do anything, why would she be upset? Li Mo stared at him in disappointment. Did you bully her? Feeling wronged, Li Shu exclaimed, What? I haven't even tried to touch her hands. Li Mo deeply looked at him. A long time later, he finally said, You better be telling the truth. Seeing that his oldest brother was finally letting him off, Li Shu let out a sigh of relief. He felt quite wronged and said, That's the truth. What about fourth brother? He's held her hands several times. Oh yeah, oldest brother, shouldn't you be asking second brother about the hairpin that wife is wearing? Second brother was definitely the one that gave it to her. Li Mo knew this even without Li Shu mentioning it. Just watch yourself. Li Shu felt depressed. How come it doesn't matter what second brother and fourth brother are doing? Suddenly, he thought of something else. He quickly said, Hey, wife recently asked me what the word wife meant. Isn't that funny? How could someone of her age not know what wife means? What? Li Mo was flabbergasted too. Why would she ask such a strange question? At this time, Li Yan, who had been watching the entertaining show from the Eastern Hut, finally came out. Oldest brother. Li Shu immediately asked, Second brother, you were the one that give wife the hairpin that she's wearing, right? Li Yan slightly smiled and straightforwardly admitted, Yup, doesn't it suit her very well? Second brother, you're cheating, Li Shu immediately whined. Third brother. Li Mo was worried that Li Man would overhear their conversation from the kitchen, so he fiercely glared at Li Shu. Li Shu pouted and lowered his voice as he continued talking, Oldest brother, that's foul play. What if wife starts liking second brother because of the hairpin he gave her? The smile on Li Yan's face deepened. Third brother, you woke up so early to get food for the pigs, then you came back to feeds the pigs and chickens. You even caught fish. Aren't you doing all of these things to please our wife so that she'll like you? Li Shu couldn't defend himself. It was true. He wanted their wife to like him, but he felt that his second brother was more successful at catching their wife's attention. He felt both admiring and envious. Since their third brother wasn't saying anything, Li Yan hid away his smile and seriously said to Li Mo, "Oldest brother, you should be more thoughtful with our wife too." Li Mo furrowed his brow. He didn't understand the meaning of his words. Li Yan walked a bit closer to him. A wicked smile flashed through his eyes as he lowered his voice and said, "Oldest brother, isn't it about time for our family to have children? Even if you're not feeling anxious over this matter, your younger brothers are very anxious about this. Besides, did you see how third Liao was looking at our wife today?" Li Mo hadn't noticed, and Li Shu hadn't been there at the time. Li Shu anxiously asked, "How was he looking at her? Was he sneaking glances at her?" Li Yan kept his gaze on Li Mo as he continued, "We all know how beautiful our wife looks. There's probably no one that can compare to her in the surrounding villages. Oldest brother, aren't you worried about the people lusting after her? Moreover, everyone in the village knows about that. What if the matter spread outside of our village and someone tries to seduce her away? If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible." Chapter 65. Chapter 65, Lighting Fires. Who would dare? Li Shu's hackles immediately went up. Li Yan rolled his eyes at him. "Who would tell you if they were going to steal your wife?" "I." Li Shu slumped down. Not knowing what to do next, he pleadingly looked at Li Mo. Li Mo's expression was solemn. His second brother's words weren't unreasonable. It was true that the goddess's ravine was lacking in women, so men trying to seduce married women and vice versa was a scandal that frequently happened here. For example, there was the Shun family, whose home was right behind theirs. First Shun and second Shun's shared wife, Xing Yang, didn't follow the proper conduct of a married woman at all. She spent all of her time flirting with other men. Of course, their wife wasn't like Xing Yang. Still, the better she was, the more she would attract the attention of other men. He was the oldest son in Li family. If he couldn't even keep their wife in line, no, that was impossible. "Second brother, you're overthinking things. That type of thing wouldn't happen in our family," Li Mo confidently stated. "Oldest brother, it's not impossible. If one day our wife becomes attracted to someone else." Before Li Shu could finish his words, Li Mo's cold glare scared those words right back down. Li Yan lightly tugged Li Shu's sleeve to indicate for him to stop speaking. Li Mo looked at his two brothers and didn't say another word. Instead, he turned around and went into the kitchen to pick up the buckets. He decided that he would fetch more water. Li Shu felt a bit anxious. What is oldest brother thinking? Li Yan stopped him from going after Li Mo. He smiled enigmatically. Anyways, he knew that oldest brother had taken his recent words to heart. Li Man didn't look for little Five to tend to the cooking fire for her today. Instead, she crouched down by the stove and tossed in pieces of firewood. When Li Mo came back with the buckets filled with water again, he smelled that something was burning. He quickly put down the buckets, rushed to the stove, and pulled out the firewood that Li Man had put in. Startled by his sudden appearance, Li Man hurriedly stood up. It was only now that she smelled there was something burning. Before she could figure out what was wrong, she saw Li Mo scooping out water and pouring it into the pot. She looked inside the pot. It was a giant smear of charred rice with only a small bit left unburnt. This. Li Man's eyes reddened in remorse. She knew that rice was considered very expensive for this family. "It's no big deal," Li Mo comfortingly said. There was no way to salvage this giant pot of rice, so he scooped it out into a large bowl. Then, he scrubbed the pot clean before adding new rice into the pot. Watching this sight, Li Man wanted to crouch down to restart the fire, but Li Mo softly called out to stop her. "Let me do that while you cook." "Oh." Li Man turned around again, scooped up some water, and used it to wash the pickled vegetables. The two of them stayed like this. One bustled around the stove, and the other one tended to the fire below. During this period, there were many times when Li Mo wanted to speak, but when the words came to his lips, he would swallow them back down each time. After Li Man had finished washing the vegetables and chopping them, she pointed at another pot and said, "Start a fire for that pot too." "All right." Li Mo nodded and started another fire. The light from burning fires shined on his face and gave off gentle warmth. Hearing the sizzling sounds from above, a burst of warmth suddenly welled up in his heart. Lit by the fiery red of the cooking fires, he seemed to see her face as the smoke wreathed upwards. It was a beautiful and moving scene. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 66. Chapter 66, Gaining Fluency. After having burned a pot of rice, Li Man didn't dare to allow her thoughts to wander again as she cooked. Once the pot of fish with pickled cabbage was finished cooking, it had delicious flavor and aroma. After lunch, Li Mo took out the family's hoes, sickles, and shovels and sharpened them. Then, he took Li Yan and Li Shu to the fields with him. Li Hua remained at home to study in the eastern hut. Li Man pulled little Five to a corner of the courtyard and picked up a branch to write and draw. She was doing her best to learn this old dialect from little Five. She had taken out the same zeal she had when she was studying for her college English fluency exam. She was determined to learn this old dialect to a level where she could speak fluently within a month. Actually, learning an old Chinese dialect was much easier than learning a foreign language. She didn't need to learn new grammar or the spelling of new words. She just needed to remember the different pronunciation. In addition, she had quickly grasped the key differences in speech pattern of this old dialect. The flat tone sounds like Z, C, and C weren't as distinct, and the tone for the last syllable would usually rise. Right now, Li Man was like her college self when she would look for foreigners to practice speaking English. Every afternoon, she would dedicate her time to chatting with little Five. At the end of their practice today, she even told him the fable about the race between the tortoise and the hare in the old dialect. She was extremely happy when little Five was able to understand her completely. In the past days, before she started cooking dinner, Li Man would point at the brown rice, white rice, cornmeal, and other items and recite the words for them. Since she had cooked a lot of fish with pickled cabbage for lunch, she had set aside a large bowl of it for dinner. For today's dinner, she decided that she would warm up the remaining fish and pickled cabbage and cook knife-cut noodles. Once the cooking fire was started, she pointed at the firewood, fire tongs, and the wood pile and named each of the items aloud in front of little Five. Once the noodles were cooked, as she was taking the noodles out of the pot, she didn't forget to point out at the bowls, chopsticks, and other items, name each of those items, and check with little Five that she had pronounced those words correctly. Little Five thought that although Li Man's pronunciation wasn't very accurate, he could still understand what she was trying to say. Besides, her voice was very pleasant to hear. When she was trying to speak the local dialect, the clumsiness of her pronunciation sounded cute. He liked to listen to her speak. And so, when Li Man tirelessly asked him if she was speaking each word correctly, he would patiently answer her. The other members in the family also thought that this phenomenon was good. If their wife was willing to learn the local dialect, it meant that she had accepted them and wanted to be part of their family. As a result, they became more encouraged too. One after another, they would take the initiative to search out Li Man to chat. They hoped that she would gain fluency sooner. And so, after dinner was over, none of the men were willing to leave the kitchen. They remained seated at the table to talk with Li Man. At the end, it was Li Man that couldn't outlast them. Yawning, she said that she was going to bed, and the men departed the kitchen one after another. After Li Man had boiled water and washed up with it, the men also washed up before going to their bed too. After working hard all day, everyone was feeling a bit tired. Once they got into their beds, they didn't chat any further, and most of them fell straight asleep instead. Li Mo had originally been feeling quite tired from working the fields with his two younger brothers this afternoon. However, although his body was exhausted, his mind felt especially awake once he lied down. He recalled the words that his second brother had said before lunchtime, and Li Man's silhouette snuck into the forefront of his mind without him noticing. On that day, when he had rescued Li Man from being hanged on that tree, Li Man's had looked so helpless and pitiful. It made him feel so distressed for her. This was the first time that Li Mo had a difficult time falling asleep. He tossed and turned. A beautiful and delicate woman was kneading dough by the stove. Her sleeves were rolled up high, and her snow-white arms were exposed. Seeing him enter the kitchen, her lips curved up into a bashful smile. "What are you looking at?" A ripple went through his heart. He wanted to say, "You're so beautiful." But he lost his nerve and lowered his head instead. He didn't dare to keep looking at her. But she stretched her hand out and stopped him from leaving. She leaned closer to his face and softly called out, "Hubby." If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 67. Chapter 67, Dreamland. Hubby? Did she just call him hubby? Li Mo felt overwhelmed with joy and excitement. "Hubby, the water is getting cold." Li Man gently took out her small feet from the bucket. Droplets of sparkling water slowly rolled down from her perfect feet. Li Mo felt as if his eyes were being stabbed. His heart was palpitating. In a dither, he took a dry towel and dried her feet for her. He had wanted to go and pour out the water she had used to wash her feet with, but in the midst of his panicky state, he suddenly felt a soft body against his. Somehow, without him being consciously aware, he had pressed the woman down against a bed. Sorry, he didn't know what to do and wanted to flee from the bed. In contrast, Li Man smoothly wrapped her arms around his neck and stared at him without blinking. Her small, delicate hands touched his face. She went from his brow to his eyes to his nose. At the end, her hands slid down to his tightly pressed lips. She gently stroked his lips and said in a low voice, "Hubby, kiss me." Boom! It felt as if something had exploded in his mind. He lowered his head and quietly stared at her moist, little mouth. Their breaths seemed to intertwine. A subtle feeling erupted as the fragrance of her body assailed his nose. It felt as if all his senses were being overcome by a surprise attack. He tightly held her arms. He wanted to ask her if this was real. Would she regret this later? However, he had a stronger urge to just envelope her so that they could become one. But, just as he was about to kiss her, her body disappeared, and there was only empty air. "Manner!" He anxiously shouted and looked around. In the midst of a white fog, Li Man's figure gradually became more distinct. He rushed forward to catch up with her, but when he did, he discovered that she was in the arms of a strange man. He felt as if someone was stabbing his heart. It was a blunt sort of pain. He heard her quietly call out by his ear, "Hubby, what's wrong?" Li Mo suddenly became clear-headed. There wasn't any stranger. The two of them were standing in their family's uncultivated fields. His wife was in his arms and was rubbing her head against his chest like a kitten. Countless feelings overwhelmingly gushed forth. Right here, in this field that was overrun by weeds, he pressed her beneath him. Oldest brother. Suddenly, he heard little Five's voice by his ear. It was like being shocked by a bolt of lightning. Startled, Li Mo trembled for a moment before waking up from his dream. His body was rigid for a moment before collapsing like someone suffering from loss of blood. Little Five was sitting by him. Observing his oldest brother's blank state, he worriedly asked, "Oldest brother, what's wrong? What's going on?" Li Yan was also on the bed. Hearing little Five's words, he turned his head towards them. "I think oldest brother had a nightmare," little Five said. At this time, the sun was just coming up. Li Mo absent-mindedly looked up at the shabby roof. Seeing that Li Mo still seemed nonplussed, little Five gently nudged him. Oldest brother, did you really have a nightmare? What were you dreaming about? Oh, it's nothing. Li abruptly came out of his half-asleep groggy state. The lower half of his body felt sticky, and he realized what had happened. In the dimly lit room, his face felt as if it was burning hot. He didn't dare to look at Little Five. It's really okay? Little Five felt less worried, so he lied back down. Still feeling a bit confused, he asked, Oldest brother, why do you have a stick with you when you sleep? If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 68. Chapter 68, Deciding. Oldest brother, why do you have a stick with you when you sleep? Huh? While Li was still feeling confused about this question, a chuckle had escaped from Li Yan. Li Mo's face turned even redder. He cleared his throat and said to Little Five, it's still early. Be good and sleep some more. There really isn't a stick? But I felt something poking my arm earlier. Little Five sat up and held out his hands. He carefully looked at Li and really wanted to lift up his oldest brother's quilt to check. Another snort of laughter came from Li Yan. At this time, Li Shu blearily opened his eyes. Huh? Li Yan said with a smile, ask oldest brother. Li Shu really was going to ask what was going on. But, before he could speak, Li warningly said, go back to sleep. What? Li Shu felt baffled. Besides, the sky was getting brighter, and he couldn't fall back asleep. He poked Li Hua, who was next to him, and quietly asked, fourth brother, what's wrong with oldest brother? Li Hua had actually been awake since Little Five called out oldest brother the first time. But, how could he possibly say aloud what had happened? Li Yan lightly smiled as he said, third brother, go to sleep for a little bit longer. Li Shu sulkily huffed. He turned over and decided to go back to sleep. After Li Mo's recent admonishment of Li Shu, Little Five didn't dare to keep asking questions. He obediently closed his eyes and went to sleep too. As for Li Mo, after he reprimanded his younger brothers into going back to sleep, he was unable to fall asleep himself. He lifted up his quilt and very quietly got off the bed. Then, he walked to the large wardrobe and took out a pair of pants. Just as he was about to exit the hut, he heard Li Yan's voice from behind. Oldest brother, it's still early. Why aren't you going to get some more sleep too? Li Mo turned his head and saw that his second brother was lying on his side with his chin propped up in one hand and observing him. His second brother was really bad. He clearly knew what was going on, but he still asked him this question. Li Mo responded, I'm not sleeping anymore. I'm going to repair the hoe that broke yesterday. Right after saying this, Li Mo pulled open the door and strode out. Li Yan looked at the sorry figure of his oldest brother and pursed his lips together as he chuckled. As soon as Li Mo exited the hut and closed the door, he dashed towards the outhouse. In the western hut, Li Man heard the sound of a door opening in the neighboring hut and immediately sat up. She felt embarrassed that she had woken up so late in the past days. After thinking it over all night, she finally thought things through. No matter what her relationship with this family was, or whom she was going to marry, she had to live her life well here. Besides, apart from this choice, there were no other options for her to choose from, right? In this strange and unfamiliar world, she was just a weak and lowly female. Even if she successfully left this mountain and the Li family, where could she go? Not only was she unable to support herself, she could die in an indescribably horrible way if she encountered wicked people. Yeah, it was true that she was a timid person that was scared of dying. But, since there was a warm, cozy shelter available to her, why should she refuse it? Besides, Li Shu was just a bit short-tempered. Other than that one negative aspect, he had a handsome face, a muscular physique, and was hardworking and competent. He didn't drink excessively, go to brothels, or gamble. He also treated her very well. Why wouldn't she want a man like him? Even if there weren't feelings between them yet, she didn't dislike him either. She believed that once she got to know him better, feelings would naturally develop between them. She was also willing to do her best to gain feelings for this new world. As for the other members of Li family, they were all good people. They definitely wouldn't mistreat her. She would happily live her life here. Her diligent efforts would definitely win her a place in this family. Once again, Li Man summoned up her courage. Then, she quickly changed her clothes and brushed her hair. Once she had tidied up, she opened her door and headed towards the kitchen. She wanted to make breakfast for everyone. Right after she entered the kitchen, she saw Liemo holding the container used for washing clothes as he walked out. There was a pair of pants inside. Li Man was briefly surprised. Soon after, she politely asked, "Are you going to do laundry?" "Just leave it there, I'll wash it with the other clothes after breakfast." As soon as he saw that it was her, Liemo felt as if his heart had almost forgotten to beat. He was so overcome with panic that he didn't even know where to look. Holding the basin, he took a step back. And no. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 69. Chapter 69, Smiling. Seeing him take several steps back in his mortified look, Li Man thought Liemo was just regarding her as an outsider. Alright, since she had already made the resolution that she would be a member of this family, then she would start doing her best right now. It's just a piece of clothing. Just leave it here. I'll wash it with the other clothes later. As she said this, Li Man had already snatched the basin from him without giving him time to explain himself and put it down in a corner. Then, she scooped out some clean water from a water bowl and took it with her to wash up as she went outside. Liemo was frozen in place. He looked through the doorway. Li Man was currently leaning over and washing her face. Her slender, snow-white neck was slightly bent into a graceful curve. She splashed some water onto her face, rubbed her damp face with her hands, and dried off with a towel. Very quickly, she was done washing her face. After pouring out the water she had used to wash her face with, Li Man turned around and discovered that Liemo had been staring at her this entire time. Blood surged to her face in embarrassment. She squeezed out a smile as she asked, "Is there something on my face?" How could that be? Her dainty face was usually fair and clear. Since she had just washed her face, it looked even softer and suppler than usual. It was as sparkling and translucent as early morning dew. There was nothing that could be more clean and pure than her. As he remembered the dream from last night, he felt an uncomfortable heat, and his gaze became deeper. She felt flustered by his gaze. Li Man didn't dare to continue meeting his eyes. She hastily put down the bowl and ran back into the western hut. Wait, no. She had to make breakfast today. And so, she mustered up her courage and returned to the kitchen. Liemo was still standing in the same place. Seeing her coming back and the blush that hadn't faded yet from her cheeks, the corners of his lips curved up. Why was he still standing here? Li Man inwardly rolled her eyes at him. She pretended to be unperturbed as she went about her work. She cleaned a bowl of uncooked rice and decided to make congee. Without thinking, Liemo crouched down by the stove and helped her with cooking by starting a fire. Li Man felt as if there was something off about this. She was busy cooking on the stove, and he was tending to the fire below. Why did this feel like a scene of martial harmony? Li Man struggled with this feeling for a bit before finally asking Liemo, "If you have other work that you need to do, you can go do it. I can handle cooking by myself. I'm not busy." Liemo slightly smiled at her. He tossed another piece of firewood into the fire. There was a crackling sound as the wood burned. His smile looked warm and dazzling as it was illuminated from the light of the cooking fire. He was smiling? Li Man's heart thumped as if she had just seen a ghost. Since she had transmigrated here, this was the first time that she saw him smile. And his smile looked so gentle too. She hurriedly turned her head away to stop looking at him. Her mind became a bit muddled again. As it turned out, it wasn't the younger brothers that were flirting with their future sister-in-law. It was the oldest brother that was trying to seduce his younger sister-in-law? Oh, no, no, no. Li Man hurriedly shook her head to dispel her absurd idea. Based on the past several days of interaction, she could see that Limo was an honest person with a steady disposition. He definitely wasn't a man that would try to seduce his younger brother's wife. He was just being nice and helping her. That's all. He was only smiling at her because he thought of her as a member of his family. Still, wasn't that smile a bit? Be careful, if you keep shaking your head like that, it'll fall off. Suddenly, a voice interrupted her thoughts. Before Li Man could recognize who was speaking, a pair of rough hands held her head still. When her eyes had settled, she saw that it was Li Yan. There was a teasing look in his eyes as he asked, "What's wrong? Is your neck feeling itchy? Want me to scratch it for you? If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible." Chapter 70. Chapter 70, Ignoring. Li Man's scalp tingled when she felt his cold fingers touching her skin. She abruptly retreated a few steps until her back touched the stove. Glaring at him, she asked, "What are you doing?" "Helping you scratch your itch," Li Yan said in a matter-of-course tone. He stretched his 10 fingers out. It felt as if he was brandishing his claws at her. "Don't come over." Frightened, Li Man tried to shrink further away back against the stove. Limo stood up. He sighed in relief when he saw that while his second brother had his hands out, he wasn't actually trying to touch Li Man. Still, he helplessly admonished, "Second brother, stop causing trouble." Li Yan put his hands down. He was in a very good mood as he laughed, "She's so cowardly." Li Man knew that he was just teasing her, and so, she felt even more annoyed as she glared at him. This person was too despicable. Why was he acting so wicked so early in the morning? Besides, she was his younger brother's fiancée. Shouldn't he restrain himself a little bit more? Could it be that people were more open-minded in ancient times compared to modern day? Seeing her uncomfortable expression, Limo harshly glared at Li Yan. "Second brother, you were acting too outrageously before. You're scaring her." Li Yan suddenly went closer to Limo and mockingly asked in a low tone, "Oldest brother, are you feeling heartache?" Limo's expression stiffened, but he didn't refute Li Yan's words. Li Yan chuckled. Seeing that Li Man was biting her lip and still glaring at him, he apologetically smiled and said, "All right, I was just messing with you. You looked upset when I came in. What's wrong? Is something bothering you?" This person's eyes were really too poisonous. Li Man pretended that she couldn't understand him. After she stopped glaring at him, she picked up a bowl and scooped out some cornmeal. She decided to make some cornmeal pancakes. The men in this household all had large appetites. It wouldn't be enough to just feed them congee. Seeing her like this, Li Yan didn't try to bug her again. He got some water and went to wash his face. At this time, Li Shu yawned as he entered the kitchen. Seeing that Li Man was kneading cornmeal flour by the stove, he went over and asked, "Wife, why are you the one that's cooking breakfast today?" He was leaning too close to her, so his warm breath was blowing on her face as he talked. Li Man blushed and instinctively contracted her neck. She thought of their relationship, and her face turned redder from awkwardness. She kept her head lowered and didn't reply. Seeing that she was keeping her head lowered and staying silent, Li Shu felt increasingly confused. So, he lowered his head and carefully looked at her. "Wife, is something wrong?" Her small face was as red as clouds during the sunset. Her long eyelashes trembled. Could it be she had a fever? Panicking, he stretched his hand out to check the temperature of her forehead. Li Man instinctively raised her arm to block him. She rebukingly glanced at him and said, "Go wash your face. It'll be time to eat breakfast soon." Li Shu was briefly stunned to hear her fake-sounding angry voice. It felt as if honey was being wrapped around his heart. He liked it when his wife looked at him and talked to him this way. Li Shu obediently agreed. He was all smiles as he went out to wash his face. By the time everyone else was done washing up, Li Man had finished cooking breakfast. In addition to the pot of congee and 3 cornmeal pancakes for each person, she had also stir-fried a plate of pickled vegetables with some chili pepper. Its sour and spicy flavor tasted quite delicious when paired with the plain congee and pancakes. Li Man had a small appetite, so 2 bowls of congee and 1 pancake was enough to fill her. She thought it over before giving her remaining 2 pancakes away. She gave one to Little Five and the other one to Li Shu. Of course, no one thought anything of it when she gave 1 piece to Little Five. But why had she given the other piece to their third brother? Li Mo, Li Yan, and Li Hua cast a confused as well as forlorn gaze at Li Man in unison. Li Man was very calm. She deliberately ignored their looks. She was Li Shu's fiancée. It was only right that she would favor him. Her action was meant to remind them of her relationship with Li Shu, so that they would stop doing things that would make other people misinterpret their actions. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 71. Chapter 71, Hardworking. Seeing that Li Man's wasn't showing any reaction, the other 3 men went back to resentfully looking at Li Shu. Why was it him? No one would have expected that the first person that their wife would like would be their third brother. Li Shu was elated. He had noticed that his wife had been frequently sneaking glances of him during the past few days. And today, she had even given him her cornmeal pancake. She was clearly indicating that she liked him. Awesome! Seeing that Li Shu looked smug enough that if he had a tail, it would be raised high up in the sky, Li Mo admonished in a heavy tone, "Eat your breakfast properly. Once you're done, we're going to the fields today, but..." Li Shu swallowed the piece of cornmeal pancake in his mouth and discontentedly said, "Wouldn't it be enough if second brother and fourth brother went with you? I'm going to help wife feed the animals and tidy up the courtyard after breakfast. Your second brother will naturally come along too, but fourth brother still has studying to do, so don't think involving him. Come on, eat faster." Li Mo was the first one to finish breakfast. After he put down his bowl and left the kitchen, he went to the eastern hut and took out hose and other tools. He used a whetstone to sharpen them up again while he was waiting. Li Shu looked a bit miserable. He secretly grumbled to himself that oldest brother was doing this because he felt jealous and didn't want him to spend more time with their wife. After Li Yin finished eating, he stood up and patted Li Shu's shoulder. Smiling, he said, "Third brother, eat faster. We'll need to plow both of the fields today." Oh. Although Li Shu was feeling reluctant, he still ate faster. He understood that in his family, only him and oldest brother were capable of real manual labor. Second brother could help out in numbers. As for his fourth brother, he had been a quiet kid. He was good at studying, but as for manual labor. Anyways, he had 3 older brothers, so doing manual labor didn't need to fall on his shoulders. After everyone finished breakfast, Li Mo and 2 of his younger brothers left to go work in the fields. Li Man mixed the leaves from the wild plants and wheat bran together to make slop and fed the 2 piglets. She also combined the leftover scraps of the wild plants into the leftover congee and had Little Five feeds the chicks with it. Then, she went back into the kitchen to tidy up the bowls and chopsticks. "Let me help you." Li Man was startled by Li Hua's voice. She hadn't noticed that he had come back into the kitchen. Li Hua quickly gathered up the bowls and chopsticks on the table and placed them inside a large pot. After scooping out some clean water, he picked up a dish rag and started washing the dishes. Li Man was startled by the sight and stood aside. Shouldn't you be studying? It's fine if I take a break from it. Li Hua turned his head and lightly smiled at her before continuing to meticulously wash the dishes. Once everything was washed, he scooped out more water from the large water jar and rinsed everything. Then, he neatly put everything away into a cabinet. After scrubbing the pot clean, Li Hua wrung the dishwashing rag to remove excess water and used it to wipe the table and stove clean. Watching from the side, Li Man thought that Li Hua was even more meticulous with cleaning than herself. She also thought that with him here, her presence was superfluous, so she wanted to go back to her hut and take out yesterday's clothes to wash. Seeing that she had turned around and was walking out, Li Hua dropped the dishwashing rag and chased after her. "Don't leave." "Ha?" Li Man stopped at the doorway and turned her head back to look at him. Perhaps it was because he was feeling eager, so Li Hua's face was slightly red. I have something that I want to say to you." "Ah?" Li Man suddenly felt a bad premonition. A teenager that was experiencing love for the first time was affectionately looking at her, and his face was flushed in embarrassment. As for what he wanted to say to her, even her toes would be able to guess the correct answer. What happened that afternoon, The image of that kiss flashed through her mind again. Feeling anything but reassured, she quickly interrupted him. "Oh, right. Do you guys have any clothes that you want washed? Bring them all out. I'll wash all of it together." After saying this, she hastily exited the kitchen and disappeared in a flash to hide in her hut. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 72. Chapter 72, Trying on Clothes. Disappointment well up in Li Hua's heart when he saw how hard she was trying to avoid him. He followed after her and left the kitchen too, but he didn't enter the hut. Instead, he only remained standing outside. After Li Man had returned to her hut and taken a moment to calm herself down, she folded up her quilt and picked up yesterday's clothes. Thinking that Li Hua had probably returned to the eastern hut by now, she opened the door and almost fell into his arms when she stepped out. "You?" Li Man raised her head to look at him, but at the same time, she didn't dare to meet his eyes. She secretly thought that it was really too disgraceful for someone of her age to feel so flustered by a youngster. "You're avoiding me." Li Hua's long eyebrows were slightly knitted as he carefully examined her. Li Man pretended to be confused by his words. She pointed at the clothes that she was holding and asked, "Do you guys have dirty clothes? Bring them to me so that I can wash them." "I know that you can understand what I'm saying." Li Hua quietly and deeply stared at her. He didn't want to miss seeing any emotion that appeared on her face. "Ah?" Li Man blinked. She looked as innocent as a little rabbit as she asked, "You don't have any clothing that needs to be washed? Never mind then." Hugging her clothes to her chest, she went around him and entered the kitchen to pick up the pants that Li Mo had dropped in the kitchen this morning. Li Hua stood in the doorway and kept his gaze locked on her as he observed her every action. What exactly did this brat want? Why was he starting at her? Just as Li Man wanted to know, seized the opportunity to show her annoyance, Li Hua said, "There are clothes. Wait here." He entered the eastern hut and returned soon after with a bundle of dirty clothing. As Li Man looked at the mountain of clothes that had been suddenly dumped into her arms, the corners of her lips twitched. He really wasn't showing any signs of being polite. Seeing her stunned expression, Li Hua suddenly smiled. He went back inside to the eastern hut. Li Man's eyelids were twitched. Were there more dirty clothes? She saw Li Hua coming out again, but this time, he came back with new clothing. "Here, this is for you." He looked at her with a burning gaze. Seeing that she had a pile of dirty clothes in her arms and wouldn't be able to accept his gift, he signaled with his eyes for her to follow him inside, then he entered Li Man's hut. Li Man felt foolish as she followed him inside with the dirty laundry. Seeing that she had brought the dirty clothes inside, his frown turned into a smile as he said, "You can put that down. Come here, try these clothes." He put down the newly made clothes on her bedside. "It's already done? So quick?" The new clothes immediately caught Li Man's attention. She put down the dirty clothes, walked to the bedside, picked up the clothing and held it up to compare it against her body. Li Hua smiled when he saw that she was as happily excited as a child. "I'll step out. Call me back once you're done trying the clothing. If something doesn't fit, I'll help you alter it." Touching the new clothing, Li Man felt ecstatic. As soon as Li Man had left the hut, she shook the clothes out and decided to change into the entire outfit. But as she did so, a pink piece of clothing fell out. They hadn't bought cloth of this color that day. It was such a vivid color too. While feeling puzzled, she hurriedly picked up the clothing. When she straightened it out to see what it was, her little face immediately became hot. It was a pink haltered top that was to be worn as an undergarment. It looked exquisite and unique. There was also a matching bottom for it. She didn't want to accept it, but it was really a very practical item. If she accepted it, then... why did that rotten brat make something like this for her? Holding the clothes, Li Man felt conflicted for a period of time. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 73. Chapter 73, Clothes Fitting. Li Hua waited outside by the doorway for a long time before lightly knocking on the door and asking, "Are you done changing?" Yeah, wait a sec." Li Man hurriedly stuffed the undergarment halter top and matching bottom beneath the other clothes, then she took a few deep breaths to calm herself before opening the door. Once the door was opened and Li Hua saw that she was still wearing her old clothes, he somewhat dejectedly asked, "Why didn't you change?" Li Man avoided making eye contact and loudly laughed. "I tried them on. They were a good fit." Thank you." "Really?" Li Hua didn't believe her. His eyes remained focused on her face. The redness hadn't faded from her cheeks yet. Being stared at like this, her rosy cheeks went back to a flaming red. "Yes, really." Even Li Man could feel the heat radiating from her cheeks. She silently scolded herself for being useless. She had already transmigrated, so why hadn't she gotten over her tendency of blushing at the drop of a hat? Li Hua had originally been a bit dismayed. He had thought that she didn't like him, but he became amused when he saw her reaction. Her little face was becoming redder and redder, and her gaze was darting to the sides like she was a small rabbit. It was obvious that she was flustered and didn't know what to do, but she was still putting on a pretense of being calm. "It's good that those clothes fit you well," he said. Why did he have to phrase it like that? Li Man thought of that undergarment halter top. Could he guess her bust measurement just by looking? No, why were her thoughts going in that direction? Li Hua was a pure-minded teenager. He was just asking about the clothes and didn't have any ulterior motives. "I'm going to go do laundry, right?" The laundry ruffled. Li Man went back inside and brought out all of the dirty clothes. Li Hua chuckled and thoughtfully went into the kitchen to bring out the laundry bucket. Li Man was worried that he was going to help her again, and more awkward incidents would arise, so she hastily said, "Oh, I'm going to the pond to wash the clothes." It's not easy to wash the clothes clean in a small bucket. As she said this, she looked around the courtyard. Where was little Five? Hadn't she asked him to feed the chicks? Where had he run off? "You want to go to the pond to wash clothes?" Li Hua deeply looked at her. The smile in his eyes hadn't diminished. "I'll go with you." "No need." Li Man hurriedly refused. Seeing his expression stiffening, she rushed to explain, "Don't you have studying to do?" Little Five can come with me instead. Li Hua half lowered his gaze, and the corners of lips slightly curved up. In a low tone, he said, "That's good too. Let's have Little Five go with you then." After saying this, he looked around. Not seeing his youngest brother anywhere, he called out, "Little Five." "Ai," Little Five's voice came from the backyard. He ran over here and was followed by Big Black as well as another smaller dog. After not seeing Big Black for several days, he seemed to have gotten bigger. He shook his body and bared his teeth before rushing over. From Li Man's scared perspective, it looked as if a lion was charging over here. Terrified that he was going to come over and bite her, she retreated several steps. "Don't be scared." Li Hua placed his arm behind her waist to support her. He was scared that she would stumble and fall. Li Man felt a bit embarrassed. Honestly, Li Mo had already told her that Big Black was domesticated and wouldn't harm her, but she couldn't help feeling scared. Furthermore, she suspected that Big Black wasn't an ordinary dog. He was probably a Tibetan Mastiff. T/N, below are pictures of Tibetan Mastiffs. Seeing Li Man's fearful expression, Li Hua comfortingly said, "Big Black grew up with oldest brother, so he's quite tame. He wouldn't bite someone without a good reason." Little Five smiled and said, "Older sister, don't be scared. Big Black wouldn't bite anyone." "Oh, right, fourth brother, this is Little Yellow." She was brought back by Big Black. As he said this, he pointed at the smaller dog. The smaller sandy dog didn't look any different from native dogs, so Li Man wasn't scared of it. "Little Five, come with me to the pond. I'm going there to do laundry. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible." Chapter 74. Chapter 74, Kindness. There were several ponds at the foot of the mountain, so there was a separate pond for everything, one for animals to drink water, one for washing toiletry items, one for clothes, one for washing vegetables, and so on. The pond that they had stopped at, which couldn't be any clearer, was where the villagers would wash their clothes. Li Man followed Little Five to the pond while carrying the basket of clothes. At this time of the day, there were already clusters of women in twos and threes by the pond. They were chatting and joking around as they washed the clothes. Perhaps something amusing was recently said. Several women were chortling. Walking around the pond, Li Man found a spot that no one was using and told Little Five, "Sit here, it won't take me long." She had Little Five stay by the shore as she went down further to wash clothes on a boulder. Seeing that Little Five was obediently listened to her words, Li Man crouched down by the edge of the water, took out all of the dirty clothes, placed them down by her feet, and started washing the clothes. This family couldn't even afford soap, so she could only use plant ash to wash the clothes. From time to time, she would use a wooden club to beat the clothes to help clean it better. Fortunately, none of the clothes were too dirty and soaking them in the water for a little bit longer was enough. She washed the clothes very quickly. It didn't take long before she had finished washing half of the clothes. Remembering the new clothes that Li Hua had made her, she thought that she should bring them out to wash too. The water in this pond was really great. The results from washing clothes in this pond was even better than using a washer. Just as she was about to turn her head and ask Little Five to go back to bring her new clothes over here, she saw a kindly-looking middle-aged woman. She also had a basket of clothes and was heading over here. Li Man hurriedly looked away. However, after that woman saw Little Five, she smiled in greeting and said, "Oh, you're Li family's wife, right?" Li Man knew that she was only capable of saying a smattering of words in the local dialect properly. Worried that someone might end up misunderstanding her, she simply pressed her lips together and gave a good-natured smile. "Auntie Li, this is my older sister." Little Five stood up and took the initiative to help Li Man out by introducing her. Auntie Li had already walked over to Li Man's side, put down her basket, and crouched down behind Li Man. She clucked her tongue in approval and said, I heard rumors that Li family had married a celestial maiden as their wife. From what I see now, those words weren't an exaggeration. Even a real celestial maiden might not have a face as beautiful as yours. This woman spoke very quickly, so Li Man wasn't able to understand the general meaning of her words. However, Li Man could see that this woman didn't have any ill intentions towards her, and little Five was only showing a silly grin. So, she didn't take this woman's words seriously. She smiled at that woman again before resuming her washing. You're almost done washing, right? Auntie Li will wait to use your spot then. Auntie Li added. Then, she took out Chinese leeks from her basket and started plucking the leaves. She listened to the other womenfolk talk, and from time to time, she would interject with her own words. Li Man couldn't quite understand what the other women were talking about, but she felt entertained by this lively atmosphere anyways. As she heard their frequent carefree laughter, she also smiled too. Very soon, Li Man finished washing the clothes. Just as she had gathered up the clothes and was about to leave, Auntie Li stopped her. She took out a large handful of Chinese leeks from her basket and insisted that Li Man take them home. Li Man felt awkward about accepting this gift. Besides, she didn't have a place to keep them. Her basket was full of clothes. Auntie Li gestured little Five over and had him hold the vegetables. Then, she warmly told Li Man to come visit her when she had free time. She had 2 daughters that were about the same age as Li Man. They would definitely find something to chat about. Li Man nodded her head in agreement. There was a trace of joy in her heart as she thought how nice it was to be the recipient of kindness in this strange world. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 75. Chapter 75, Unwilling. By the time she finished washing clothes, returned home, and hanged up the clothes, it was already noon, and time to prepare lunch. Li Hua was inside a hut and studying. As soon as little Five had returned home with her, he had gone off to play with Big Black and Little Yellow. Li Man didn't call him back either. She took a small basket and went into the backyard to pick some string beans and chili pepper. After washing the rice and pouring it into a big pot, she tossed in a few pieces of wood under the stovetop to increase the cooking fire. Then, she stood up and started washing the vegetables. There would only be 2 vegetables for lunch. The Chinese chives that Auntie Li had given her, as well as a plate of string beans that were flavored with chili peppers. Right after she had finished washing the vegetables, Li Mo, Li Yan, and Li Shu returned home. The 3 of them had stopped by the kitchen's entrance. Soft smiles appeared in their eyes when they saw that she was busy with cooking. However, Li Shu couldn't help himself in the end. After he tossed the hoe into a corner of the hut, he turned around and went into the kitchen. He stopped by Li Man's side and asked with a grin, "Wife, what yummy food are you cooking for lunch?" Li Man skirted a bit to the side and ignored him. Li Shu looked at her as she kept her head low and focused on chopping the chili peppers. As she moved, her hair slipped out from behind her and blocked half of her small face. She used her fingers to tuck her hair behind her ear again. Li Shu suddenly felt an inexplicable urge that spread from his chest. He turned his head to check the doorway. Seeing that there was no one else around, he lowered his head and snuck a kiss from behind. While Li Man was feeling perplexed by that sensation, the man that had done a bad deed had already fled in panic. She blankly wiped her neck. Had he intentionally kissed her? Or, did he just accidentally bump into her? Li Shu escaped from the kitchen and ran straight into the eastern hut. Once he was out of public's gaze, he stiffly lay down on the bed and was breathing heavily as he looked at the ceiling. He had kissed his wife. He had finally kissed her. After Li Yan had washed his hands and returned inside, he sought his younger brother like this and curiously asked, "What's wrong?" Li Shu couldn't bother with paying attention to him. He was busy keeping his eyes closed as he recollected that recent moment. He wished that it could have continued further. It was inevitable that he would feel a bit dissatisfied. It would be so wonderful if one day, he could slowly and deliberately kiss his wife in public. Inside the kitchen, after blanking out for a bit, Li Man didn't take the matter too seriously. She thought that Li Shu must have just accidentally bumped into her. No one would kiss the collar of someone's clothes, then just run off. After she finished chopping the vegetables, Little Five came inside and crouched down by the stove to tend the fire for her. She and Little Five were already a well-coordinated team when it came to cooking together. There was no awkwardness between them, unlike when Li Mo was helping her. Li Man was able to chat with him while she cooked. When she asked him where everyone else was, Little Five replied that they were resting in the eastern hut. She thought that they were probably tired from working so hard in the morning, so she wanted to cook soup to show her appreciation, but this family didn't even have eggs. Even the cleverest housewife couldn't cook without the necessary ingredients. She could only do her best to cook with the vegetables that she had. After she finished cooking the food, Li Man brought them out onto the table and sent Little Five to tell his brothers that lunch was ready. However, after Little Five had been gone for a while, he still hadn't come back. After she had scooped out rice for everyone, she came out of the kitchen to call them over herself. A spell of roaring laughter came from the eastern hut. She suddenly thought of how they were a group of brothers. Who knows what they were joking about? It would be awkward if she boldly entered their hut. And so, she stopped by the doorway and called out, "Time to eat that." She suddenly heard whimpering from a corner of the courtyard. Li Man turned around to look and was terrified by what she saw. Big Black was on top of Little Yellow and baring his teeth as he whined. As for Little Yellow, Li Man could only see her head and her front legs. The rest of her body was hidden underneath Big Black. Li Man felt as if all the blood in her body was going to congeal. She loudly called out, "Hurry, come out. Big Black is going to eat Little Yellow." If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 76. Chapter 76, Embarrassment. Li Man felt as if all the blood in her body was going to solidify. She loudly called out, "Hurry, come out. Big Black is going to eat Little Yellow." Inside the hut, the brothers heard her scream and rushed out in panic. Leaning against the wall for support and shivering in fear, Li Man didn't care who was next to her. She just grabbed him and pointed at the corner. She didn't dare to look again. She stuttered, "Little Yellow. Big Black ate Little Yellow." Li Mo looked at the little woman that was cowering by the wall. The hand that was clutching his clothes was also shaking. He couldn't help but feel tenderness towards her. He gently grabbed hold of her and comfortingly said, "Don't be scared." He meaningfully looked at his younger brothers to hurry up with separating that pair of beasts. However, Li Yan just turned around to face the wall and tried to stifle his laughter. Little Five squeezed out from behind the doorway and curiously asked, "What happened?" Li Hua hurriedly stood in front of him and blocked his view by covering his eyes. It was only Li Shu that remained leaning against the doorway and looking at Big Black. An audience had surrounded Big Black, but he was still maintaining his composure as he vigorously and violently enjoyed his pleasure. Li Shu couldn't stop himself. He burst out in boisterous laughter, then he picked up a stone and threw it at Big Black in front of everyone. Suffering from a painful attack, Big Black got up from Little Yellow. Li Shu immediately shouted, "Wife, look, Little Yellow is okay. Big Black didn't eat her." Puzzled, Li Man turned head and really did see Little Yellow rising up in one bound and scampering away. As for Big Black, he briefly glared at everyone with reddened eyes before chasing after Little Yellow. Li Man got a clear look of the black and long rod-like thing that was still swinging back and forth underneath him. It wouldn't be possible for Little Yellow to outrun Big Black. Only a short period had passed before Big Black had pressed Little Yellow down again by the chicken fence. Little Yellow whined for a bit before allowing Big Black do as he pleased with her body. Li Man watched this scene in shock. As she clearly saw Big Black's barbaric movements, her mind was blank. She didn't know how to respond. Liemo didn't think that his third brother would brainlessly stand by and do nothing and have Li Man witness this type of scene again. He hurriedly moved his body to block her line of sight. He wanted to say something to alleviate the awkwardness of the moment, but he didn't know what to say. Seeing Li Man like this, Li Shu was already laughing so hard that he couldn't stand up straight. Wife, Little Yellow is the wife that Big Black recently found. Our family is going to have puppies soon. Li Man trembled for a moment as she saw him laugh. Her face immediately turned burning hot. Dear God, what had she done to deserve this? She had ended up shouting for these men to come outside to watch this erotic show, and it had been the wild animal kind too. This was way too embarrassing. As soon as Li Man turned around, she ran into her hut and closed the door. With her back against the wall and her heart pounding, she recollected the recent scene. She really wanted to dig a hole and crawl into it. Why hadn't she realized it sooner? When she was a child, she had seen a rooster leaning over a hen and forcefully pressing its coxcomb. She had, though the rooster was bullying the hen, so she picked up a stone and was determined to drive the rooster far away. Now, she had seen a male dog and female dog. Damn it! How could she have known that Little Yellow was a girl dog? Besides, there was too big of a size difference between those two dogs. Little Yellow was so small. Most of her body would be hidden under Big Black's bulk when he was on top of her. Moreover, her first meeting with Big Black had been too terrifying. He had been holding a pheasant dripping with blood in his mouth. It was inevitable that she would associate that bloody scene with Big Black. How could she have known there would be a passionate and warm side to him? Bah, this incident was simply unbearable. She really didn't have the face to go outside and see other people. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 77. Chapter 77, Apologizing. Li Man leaned against the door as she mentally beat herself up while feeling ashamed and resentful. When she had finally calmed herself down a bit, she realized that had entered the wrong hut. This was the Li brothers' hut. She plopped down on the floor. Should she just go ahead and kill herself? She had originally planned on refusing to face reality by hiding in her room for the rest of the afternoon. She had wanted to wait until the awkwardness had passed before going out again. Great, she was in someone else's hut. How could she stay here to hide? On the other side of the door, the men looked at each in dismay. Li Yan was the first one that couldn't maintain a serious face. He burst into laughter. With one hand holding onto the wall for support, he continued to chuckle as he said, "So cute and amusing." Liemo was almost grinding his back molars. However, as soon as he pictured the recent scene and that woman's pitiful, shocked, embarrassed, and at a complete loss appearance, the lines on his handsome face subconsciously softened and the emotion in his dark eyes thawed into amusement. And yet, he resisted the urge to laugh and said to Li Yan, "Second brother, stop laughing. She's easily embarrassed." Oh. Li Yan pressed his lips together and turned around. He still wanted to laugh. Li Hua's handsome face was flushed. This was the first time he saw a scene like that too. It felt as if a fire had been lit in his heart, and his blood was boiling. His gaze drifted towards the door. He wondered how she was doing on the other side. Li Shu didn't dare to continue smiling. He had just been lightheartedly fooling around before, but after seeing his wife rush into the hut, he felt a bit nervous. Wife wouldn't be angry, right? What do you think? Li Mo sternly glared at him. That woman was very shy. She definitely wouldn't be coming out anytime soon. With a doleful face, Li Shu hurriedly strode towards the door. I'll go apologize to her. Third brother. Li Hua quickly stopped him. An apology at this moment would be the same as pouring oil on a fire. She would end up being even more unwilling to come out. While Li Shu was blankly looking at his fourth brother, Li Yin came over, gently patted his shoulder, and wickedly smiled as he said, "Third brother, you're doomed. Wife will definitely feel resentment towards you over this matter for the rest of your life." After Li Yin said this, he pulled little Five, who had been completely lost over what had recently happened. "Come on, let's all go eat. Little Five, bring over wife's meal later." Oh, little Five agreed while still feeling muddled and being pulled into the kitchen by his second brother. Li Mo glanced at Li Shu with a composed expression, and Li Shu obediently followed him into the kitchen too. Li Hua had preemptively remained in front of the door to block Li Shu from doing something stupid again. He waited until his third brother, who had a vexed expression, entered the kitchen before he following after the group. Inside the kitchen, Li Yin had already taken out food for Li Man and was about to have little Five bring it over when Li Shu hurriedly went forward and extremely fawningly said, "Little Five, sit down to eat. I can deliver the food." Li Mo looked at Li Shu and ordered, "You, sit down." Li Shu was somewhat unwilling. "Oldest brother, I'm worried that wife is angry. Let me bring the food over. I'll apologize while I'm there." After he said this, he hastily snatched the bowl from little Five and rushed out of the kitchen and to the eastern hut before anyone could stop him. He lightly knocked on the door and pleaded in a soft voice, "Wife, I was wrong. I shouldn't have shown you what Big Black and Little Yellow were doing. Don't be angry anymore. I brought you lunch. Could you open the door, please? That rotten man, how dare he mention it?" Li Man gloomily bit her bottom lip. "Humph. I won't open the door. I won't. Wife, please open the door. How about you just beat me up? I won't dare to do something like that again. If next time Big Black and Little Yellow are doing that again, I swear that I'll drive them far away from you so that you won't see. Is that better?" Put. Why would there be a second time? Did he think she was an idiot? If she saw it again, why would she still stupidly not know what was happening? Wife, just say something or make a sound. The food is getting cold. If you won't open the door, I'm going to push it open. Li Shu was an impetuous person. After pleading with her so many times and seeing that there was no reaction from inside, he became anxious enough to want to forcefully push open the door. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 78. Chapter 78, Considering his options. Li Man couldn't win against Li Shu's strength. Besides, the thin door couldn't put up much resistance either. The door started to shake after only a few pushes from Li Shu, and dust fell from the top. Li Man was truly worried that he would wreck the door. She hurriedly exclaimed, "Stop pushing. Put the food down by the door. I'll get it myself." Li Shu stuck his ear against the door and loudly asked, "Wife, what did you say?" This rotten guy was definitely just pretending to not understand her simple words. Feeling annoyed, she said, "Put it down by the door." "Ah? What? I can't hear you clearly." As Li Shu said this, he pushed the door a few times again. As more dust fell down, it made a quiet rustling sound. The dust almost got into Li Man's eyes. Seeing that he would soon break the door, Li Man angrily gritted her teeth and abruptly opened the door. As soon as she did so, Li Shu, who had been leaning against the door, started to fall down. Fortunately, Li Shu was strong and had long arms. He grabbed hold of the doorway and didn't crash onto the ground. After regaining his balance, he saw Li Man's angry expression. He delivered the bowl of mood and apologetically smiled as he said, "Wife, it's time to eat." "All right." Li Man took the bowl from his hand, then pushed him outside. She slammed the door shut without waiting for him to speak. Right after the door was closed, she felt that her behavior wasn't right. This hut was their bedroom. After lunch, Li Hua would need to come here to study. Besides, the other people might want to come here to take an afternoon nap. She couldn't just remain here and tyrannically take over their room. And so, the recently closed door was open again. Before the startled Li Shu had time to say something, Li Man had already dashed inside her own hut. With a slam, she firmly closed another door. Li Shu stared at the door that was still swaying. Truly feeling annoyed with himself, he said, "Wife, I was wrong." Looking like a dog that had its tail between its legs, Li Shu returned to the kitchen. Seeing that everyone else was enjoying his meal, Li Shu felt even worse. Was everyone in high spirits because he had upset their wife? "Come eat." Li Mo pushed a bowl of rice towards him. "Oldest brother." Li Shu miserably scowled as he said, "Wife seems really angry at me. I said so many words, but she wouldn't listen to any of it. She even slammed the door in my face and glared at me. What were you expecting her to do?" Li Yan mocked. Li Shu fiercely glared at him. "I know that wife has been treating me well the past few days. You're just jealous." Li Yan picked up a piece of string bean with his chopsticks and ate it. He didn't refute Li Shu's words and only darkly smiled. Li Mo added some vegetables to Li Shu's bowl and comfortingly said, "It's okay. It's all right." He knew that Li Man was a kind-hearted person. She wouldn't really stay angry at Li Shu. At most, she was just too shy and too embarrassed to face them. Really? Li Shu didn't quite believe his oldest brother's words. If his oldest brother actually understood women, then how come he had never seen a woman interested in him? But, what about his second brother and fourth brother? Li Shu considered his options before decisively asking Li Hua, "Fourth brother, what do you think? Do you think that wife will hold a grudge against me and never talk to me again?" Li Hua actually had the same train of thought as Li Mo. He chuckled and said, "Third brother, as long as you don't bring up this matter again, she won't continue to be angry with you." Li Shu thought it over and finally decided that these words were reasonable. He solicitously added a bunch of Chinese chives to Li Hua's bowl. "Here, fourth brother, eat more. Wife cooked this." Li Hua's face turned red in embarrassment. Who didn't know that their wife had cooked this meal? Third brother's words made it sound as if Li Man only belonged to him. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 79. Chapter 79, Delight. After the meal was over and Li Hua had washed the pots and bowls and tied everything up, he saw Li Mo sharpening a coulter in the courtyard as he was walking to the eastern hut. He stepped forward and asked, "Oldest brother, why aren't you taking a nap?" Oldest brother isn't tired. Li Mo tested the sharpness of the coulter with his fingers as he said, "Once the farmland is plowed one more time this afternoon, it'll be ready for us to plant some seeds after a few days. I want to grow some sweet potato and corn first. Fourth brother, what do you think?" Sweet potato and corn were two vegetables that were relatively easier to grow. Moreover, these two plants didn't require too much from the soil. It was a thoughtful plan. It's enough for oldest brother to decide. You know more about these things than me. All right then, go inside and rest for a bit. Studying every day is tiring too. Li Mo slightly smiled. He sprinkled more water on the coulter and continued grinding it against the sharpening stone. Li Hua felt a bit embarrassed by these words. If studying was considered tiring, then what about the daily manual labor that his brothers did? "Oldest brother, let me help you with sharpening the coulter." "No need. They only need a few strokes against the sharpening stone." As Li Mo said this, he used his finger to test the sharpness of the coulter again. After swiping it against the sharpening stone a few more times, he put the coulter down. Li Hua crouched down by his side. As he watched his oldest brother's calloused hands, he suddenly felt upset. Oldest brother. Li Mo waited for him to finish speaking, but after not hearing anything for a while, he doubtfully asked, "Who?" Li Hua suddenly smiled in delight. "We have a wife now." Li Mo's hands paused, and a silly smile appeared on his face. Right, his younger brothers had all grown up, and they finally had a wife too. It wouldn't be long before there would be children in their family. Their fathers and mother no longer had to worry about them in the afterlife. Li Yan and Li Shu didn't have the habit of taking naps. Although they had returned to the eastern hut, it was only to figure out what to do about the door and the wall. Shortly after, they came out of the hut. Their family had only recently purchased 2 plots of farmland, and they had the same thoughts as their oldest brother. They wanted to clean up the fields and grow some food. If they could have a good harvest, then they wouldn't need to worry about food at the end of the year. After Li Mo packed up the tools, the 3 brothers headed out to work on the fields again. Li Man was still hiding in her hut. It was only after she heard the sounds of movement from outside and knew that the brothers had gone out again to work that she gingerly opened her door and came out. When she entered the kitchen, she saw that the other bowls and chopsticks had already been washed. She scooped out some water to wash her own bowl. After she finished washing up and fed the piglets and chicks, she thought of her new clothes. She had to wash them before she could wear them. And so, she took a wooden basin and went to the hand pump water well. Actually, when Li Hua heard the sound of Li Man's door opening, he walked to the window and secretly watched her. Seeing that her expression looked normal, he stopped worrying. He slightly smiled as he watched her expend a great deal of effort to pump out water. It was obvious that she had never done this type of manual labor. Her posture when pumping out water wasn't correct. Although she was able to get some water to come out, it took her a strenuous amount of effort. He finally couldn't stop himself from going out to help her. He gently pushed Li Man to the side and said, "Let me do it." His movements were skillful, and it only took him a few moments to get the water gurgling out and filling the wooden basin. Li Man smiled as she said, "Thank you." Just as she was about to put the clothes into the basin to wash, she thought of the undergarment halter top and clutched the clothes her chest instead. She said to him, "You can go back. I can do the rest myself." Li Hua agreed and returned to his room. Li Man waited until he left before hurriedly washing her new clothes. Once she finished washing, she hung them up on the bamboo poles. The sunshine was pretty good today. It would probably only take half an afternoon for the clothes to dry. It would be fine to leave other clothes hanging outside. It was only the undergarments. She should take them down before the men came back. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 80. Chapter 80, Despicable. Li Man had originally assumed that those 3 brothers wouldn't return until the evening, but they unexpectedly returned before the sun had fallen below the mountains. Li Man felt a bit gloomy. She wanted to take down the halter top undergarment and other items, but she was worried about being too obvious. What if they didn't notice anything, and it was her activity that ended up drawing their attention to it? And so, she pretended to be calm and silently prayed that they wouldn't notice. Otherwise, it would be too embarrassing. In reality, Li Man was overthinking things. After coming home from a day of tiring work, why would the brothers notice what kind of clothes was hanging on the bamboo poles? After placing the tools down in a corner of the courtyard, Li Shu went into the kitchen and brought out a wooden bucket. He pumped out some water from the well, then took off his shirt and started to rinse off his body with cold water right in the courtyard. It was currently April. Although the temperature wasn't too low, it wasn't warm either. Wasn't he worried about catching a chill from pouring cold water over himself? Li Man stood by the window and furrowed her brow as she watched this sight. This person was really awful at taking care of himself. To her surprise, after Li Shu finished rinsing off, dried his body with a towel, and went into the eastern hut to change into clean clothes, Li Yan came out bare-chested. He also pumped out some water and started to rinse off like Li Shu. Li Man hadn't expected that this guy's figure would be this good too. Although he wasn't as well built as Li Shu, Li Yan had a tall and slender stature with wide shoulders and a thin waist. He could be considered perfectly proportioned. Underneath the setting sun, there was a different kind of sexiness as the crystal-clear water droplets slowly rolled down his body. Li Man clucked her tongue in wonder. Li family was truly a place that produced beautiful men. All these brothers had handsome faces and even their figures were really good too. It had to be said that the gods had truly shown favor to this family. And yet, it was kind of strange. These men were so outstanding, so why were none of them married? It couldn't be because their family was a bit poor, right? As she was appreciatively looking at Li Yan and pondering that question, she was caught off guard when Li Yan poured the rest of the water over his head. There was a loud splashing sound as the water cascaded down. When he suddenly turned his head, she saw that his long hair, which had gotten soaked by the water, was sticking to his face, and the water droplets blurred his elegant, almond-shaped eyes. The corners of his lips were curved up into a shallow arc. His wicked, insincere smile was attractive enough to lead people astray. While this sight enamored Li Man, Li Yan's smile deepened and he started to untie the belt. What was he going to do? He wasn't going to take off his pants, right? She hurriedly turned around and covered her eyes with her hand, but then she heard a burst of laughter from the outside courtyard. It was at this moment that she realized she had gotten too distracted while watching the beautiful man showering. Humph! She didn't believe that he would really dare to take off his pants in public. He was truly despicable. He probably already noticed that she was watching him from the window a while ago, that's why he was being. What a pervert! He had even pretended to take off his pants. Despicable, so despicable. Still, it was one thing to have these thoughts. When all was said and done, Li Man didn't have the courage to turn around and check. Once he was done washing up, Li Yan was about to go back inside to change into clean clothing when he saw that Li Mo was crouched down in a corner and feeding Big Black. He asked, "Oldest brother, why aren't you taking a rinse too?" Actually, before Li Man's arrival, this household only had bachelors. Walls enclosed the courtyard, so there usually wasn't anything they would abstain from doing while in the outside courtyard. And so, when they came back from work with a body full of smelly sweat, they would simply take a rinse by the hand-pumped water well. But, now that Li Man was here, oldest brother had warned them to not act too impudently. And so, when they were taking a rinse this time, they only took off their shirt and left their pants on. "Oh, I'm not in a rush. I'll wash up later," Li Mo replied with his head lowered. While drying his hair with a towel, Li Yan smiled and said, "Oldest brother, are you feeling shy?" Li Mo's handsome face turned slightly red. He mumbled, "Nonsense. Quickly, go inside and change out of your wet clothing. Be careful that you don't catch a cold." "Oh." There was a knowing smile on Li Yan's face as he turned around and went inside. Li Mo fed a few more chicken bones to Big Black. He looked at hand-pumped water well in the courtyard, but still felt that it wouldn't be appropriate since Li Man was here. She was so shy and wouldn't be used to a bunch of shirtless men showering in front of her. It would better for him to wait until the evening. T/N, lol, Li Mo, if only you knew that Li Man had been practically drooling over Li Yan's body. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 81. Chapter 81, Rainy Night. Seeing no movement in the courtyard and presuming that those brothers wouldn't be coming outside soon, Li Man hastily came out and took down the clothes that had been drying in a corner of the courtyard. Once she folded the clothing, she stacked it up and placed at the head of her bed. Of course, the men's clothing was also in this stack. After dinner, she could have little Five take these clothes over. Speaking of dinner, Li Man checked the time by looking at the color of the sky through her window. She decided that it was about time to prepare dinner, so she quietly entered the kitchen. There weren't many ingredients available, so how about making some handmade noodles? Fortunately, this family of men wasn't picky eaters. She felt very satisfied that they would eat until nothing was left every time she cooked. She went to the back garden, picked some green vegetables, washed them, and decided to cook them with the noodles. In less than 15 minutes, she finished cooking the noodles and vegetables for dinner. By this time, the sky had darkened. She lit an oil lamp first, then she left the kitchen to call them over for dinner. After the afternoon had passed, Li Man had already completely forgotten the embarrassing incident that had occurred at noon. And so, there wasn't any awkwardness during the dinner. After dinner, just as usual, they didn't ask her to do the dishes. Once she had little Five take the men's clean clothes, she decided to heat up some water so she could take a bath in her hut. She eagerly put on the new clothes that Li Hua had made her after taking a bath. It was so unexpected for that teenager to be so skillful with his hands. Not only did he know how to mend quilts, he also knew how to make clothes. Look at how fine and uniform these stitches were. It could be compared to the work done by using a sewing machine. Furthermore, he had chosen a good material for the undergarment halter top, and the sizing was perfect. It fitted wonderful on her body. There was a cloth band at the top that could be slipped over her head and two pieces of string at the bottom that could be tied together. Once the strings were tied around her waist, it showed off the exquisite curves of her body in great detail. What's more, the pink color of the cloth set off her delicate as china skin so that it looked even better than snow. Li Man liked the undergarment halter top a lot as soon as she put it on. After that, she happily tried on the two sets of outer clothing. It was only after she had put on one of the outfits that she realized how talented Li Hua was. He had completely copied the style of the dress she had tried on in that clothing store. The only difference was that the outfit in the clothing store had knotted buttons, and he had made a belt for this outfit. T/N, below are pictures of knotted buttons, pankas. They're decorative fasteners at the neck and chest area of kipayos. If you want to read more about kipayos, there's a detailed guide here. http://www.thepanku.com/quipayo-cheongsam-parts-comprehensive-guide/right bracket. CH082, Panku 1. CH082, Panku 2. Although knotted buttons were elegant and beautiful, the belt had a sophisticated chicness. It was really amazing. She definitely had to thank him again tomorrow. It must have taken him a lot of effort to make all these clothing for her in such a short period of time. After smugly appreciating how good the clothing looked on her, Li Man finally took off the outer layer, neatly folded it up, and placed it at the head of her bed. She went to bed with only the undergarment halter top and the matching bottom. Wearing the close-fitting and snug clothing, she felt extremely comfortable as she drifted off to sleep. However, just as she was lingering in a sweet dream, there was a flash of lightning through the window as well as a thunder that sounded like an exploding bomb. It was loud enough to startle her awake. As she opened her eyes, she felt coolness on her cheeks and lips as water unceasingly dripped down from ceiling. There was a rumble of thunder again. It was deafeningly loud. As the lightning flashed by, the room seemed to be illuminated with a white light for a moment. Ah! Terrified, Li Man covered her ears. At this time, she was alarmed to see that a large patch of the thatched roof was soaked through, and pieces of the roof were falling down. Giant drops of water continued to fall from the ceiling, and she could feel wetness seeping through the quilt at her feet. In the neighboring hut, Liemo suddenly opened his eyes. Without explaining himself, he flung back the covers and dashed outside. With the exception of little Five, who was young enough to sleep deeply, the claps of thunder and Li Man's scream had also awaked everyone else. Right after Liemo left, one by one, they ran to the western hut without even putting on their shoes first. Inside the western hut, Li Man had already gotten out of bed and was standing by the head of the bed. She was blankly looking at the roof. After the flashes of lightning had passed, she saw that the soaked portion of the roof was on the verge of collapsing as the wind blew through it. What was she supposed to do? The roof looked like it was going to collapse. Just as she was struggling over whether or not she should go over to tell them, Li Mo kicked the door open. The cold wind poured into the room, but Li Man didn't care about the cold. She looked at Li Mo like he was her knight in shining armor. She hurriedly went over, grabbed Li Mo, and pointed at the roof. Look, is it going to fall? At this time, the other three brothers entered the hut, but no one was looking at the roof. Instead, their gazes were all directed at Li Man. Just as Li Man was feeling puzzled, another flash of lightning went by. When the dazzling white light illuminated the hut, she suddenly remembered what she was wearing. With a whoosh, she ran to her bed and wrapped the soaked quilt around herself. Li Mo turned his head and fiercely glared at his younger brothers. All of you, go back to our room. Oldest brother, wife, Li Shu wasn't reassured, but before he could finish speaking, Li Mo had already walked to the bed and scooped up Li Man along with the quilt that was wrapped around her. Li Mo stared at her large, dazed eyes and said, "It's raining too heavily tonight. It's dangerous for you to stay here. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible." Chapter 82. Chapter 82, The First Night, 1. Li Man was slightly stunned. If this hut was dangerous, then where could she go? This home only had 2 huts for sleeping. What are you doing? Feeling unsettled, she instinctively grasped his sleeve. Li Mo's heart was widely beating too. He was flooded with agitation, but he still tried his best to project a calm demeanor to comfort her. Don't worry. We'll go to the other hut to sleep. We? Li Man felt even more stupefied. Her eyes were widened as she incredulously stared at Li Mo. What was he thinking of doing by bringing her to the other hut? There was only one bed in the eastern hut. Moreover, how could he hold his future sister-in-law like this in front of his younger brother? This was so improper. She instinctively looked at Li Shu. Contrary to her expectations, after Li Shu heard these words, he yelped and ran back to the eastern hut in excitement. He lit an oil lamp, and the hazy light illuminated every corner of the hut. Li Yan and Li Hua had also returned to the hut with Li Shu and were self-consciously standing in a corner. As they silently watched through the doorway as their oldest brother carried their wife into their room, they felt an indescribable feeling of excitement. Li Mo actually was at a loss. There was only one bed in the hut, and little Five was still asleep. He was worried that Li Man wouldn't agree, but he didn't have any other ideas. In contrast, Li Shu didn't notice the weirdness of the situation. He excitedly took the lead by climbing onto the heated bed and curled up in his quilt. Then, he stretched his hands out and said to Li Mo, who had just walked inside, "Oldest brother, I can share my quilt with wife." The space between Li Mo's brow was very furrowed. What kind of nonsense was third brother saying? What if these words scared their wife? Surprisingly, Li Man didn't look at Li Shu. Instead, she was fiercely glaring at Li Mo. "Put me down." He better not stuff her underneath Li Shu's quilt. Li Mo knew that she was feeling uneasy and tried to comfort her by softly saying, "Stop squirming." Then, he said to Li Hua, "Fourth brother, is there another quilt in the cupboard? Take it out if there is one." How could there be an extra quilt? Li Hua said, "N." But, instead of opening the cupboard, he went to the side of the bed and brought over the quilt that he had been using. Seeing this sight, Li Mo approvingly nodded. Fourth brother's quilt was the cleanest one. Li Mo carried Li Man to the bed, gently put her down, and said in soft voice, "Please put up with this for tonight. I'll help you fix your roof tomorrow." Li Man innocently bit her bottom lip. Even if she wanted to refuse, she didn't have a better idea of her own. She couldn't go to the kitchen to sleep, right? But, how would the other people fit on the bed if an extra person was added? With her damp quilt wrapped around herself, she awkwardly looked at Li Mo. She had lived for so many years, but this was the first she was sharing a room with several men. Moreover, she would be sleeping on the same bed as them. Li Shu felt very disappointed with his oldest brother's choice. He silently grumbled. Why wouldn't oldest brother place Li Man down with him? He wouldn't do anything bad to her. Moreover, it was very warm and cozy underneath his quilt. Wife would feel so comfortable sleeping here. Seeing that Li Man was going to sleep at the edge of the bed, he suddenly felt happy and started to hurriedly crawl over there. He wanted to sleep next to her. Startled, Li Man pulled her body closer to herself. Li Mo pulled a long face. His voice dropped as he said, "Third brother, go sleep on the other side of the bed." Ah! Before Li Shu could protest, Li Mo continued to make the sleeping arrangements. "Fourth brother, you can squeeze in with little 5. Oh! Li Hua obediently got into bed and lied down to sleep by little 5's side. And then, without Li Mo needing to say anything, Li Yin shrugged and went back to sleeping in his original position. However, Li Shu was sitting at the other side of the bed and staring at Li Mo as he asked, "Oldest brother, why does it have to be me that sleeps here? Go to sleep." Li Mo briefly looked at him in askance, then he extinguished the light and tried to keep his movements as light as possible as he got onto the bed. Li Shu grunted. He felt very wronged as he gloomily lied down too. His body was as stiff as a corpse as he stared at the ceiling. If you find any errors, ads pop-up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 83. Chapter 83, The First Night, 2. Li Man remains sitting on the other side of the bed. She looked at the brothers that were laid out in a row. Little 5 was the closest one to her, then it was Li Hua, Li Yin, Li Mo, and finally Li Shu. The brothers were very well behaved in this dark room. Even the sound of their breathing seemed restrained as if they were worried about bothering her. Suddenly, all of the embarrassment, nervousness, and discomfort that she was feeling completely disappeared without a trace. Instead, she felt this new experience was slightly amusing. In the midst of this darkroom, she slowly unwrapped her quilt, tossed it to the side, and swiftly burrowed underneath the quilt that Li Hua had laid out for her. This quilt was still pretty new, and the cover for it had recently been washed and soaked in sunlight. When she sniffed the quilt, there was a pleasant scent of grass and ink. Moreover, it still had some residual warmth. As soon as her chilled body burrowed into the quilt, she was immediately surrounded by warmth. It felt so comfortable. Little by little, Li Man's consciousness floated away. Surprisingly, there was a bout of sleepiness, and she quickly fell into slumber. However, once she fell asleep, it was even harder for the nearby men. Originally, everyone was acting more properly because of her close proximity. They didn't even dare to let their imaginations run wild. But, once she was asleep, they immediately relaxed. And once they were less tense, their excited minds imagined all sorts of fantasies. Li Shu was the first one that couldn't control himself. He quietly called out, "Wifey," a couple of times. After not hearing any response, he couldn't resist kicking away his quilt. Too hot. Li Mo, who was lying next to him, hastily chided, "Be quieter." He was worried about waking up Li Man. However, once Li Shu complained about the temperature, the other men also felt as if their bodies were burning up, and the discomfort of not being able to let out that heat.